This guy is a shepherd that the village doesn't like very much, but what they don't know is that he is actually a mage, and in this world mages and knights are at the absolute peak of power, except that knights are nothing more than slaves to mages, which is why he hides his power. Until later, when the village is attacked by a giant monster, he discovers while fighting that he is actually a noble mage, coming from an extremely powerful bloodline. So he decides to simply leave this boring village to reach the peak of power and uncover the truth about himself. But before we dive in, make sure to drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and let's get into it. Our story begins with a young boy declaring that he wants to become a mage. He squares off against his friend as if she were a monster, and she plays along, pretending to be a magical beast that devours mages. The little mage charges at the girl and hits her for real, leaving her absolutely furious. He stands there completely convinced that monsters are supposed to lose to mages. The girl protests that she wants to be a mage too, but he tells her no. She cries out that it's totally unfair. Watching the two of them from a distance, an old man walks over and chuckles that these little brats sure have a lot of energy in the morning. The boy immediately recognizes him as Grandpa Labus. He asks the old man what it takes to become a mage. Labus tells him it's not something you can just become because you want to. Mages are the pinnacle of humanity, those who stand above others by virtue of their high lineage. They are nobles and knights who inherited the ability to wield power from their mysterious ancestors. So unfortunately, common people simply cannot become mages. A man standing just behind Labus asks how he can say something like that to children. But shifting the topic, he wants to know if a certain rumor is true. Labus asks what he's talking about. The man says he heard that a monster has appeared. Labus immediately goes serious and confirms it's true. They say a traveler encountered something at the village entrance last night. The creature's entire body was shrouded in black shadow, and it had the form of a leopard the size of a house. Labus urges everyone not to worry, because the village chief has already gone to the city to seek help from a mage. He will definitely bring one back, and the monster will be dealt with. The little girl's mother sighs in relief and tells her daughter that she heard that, so for now they cannot go into the forest because it's far too dangerous. Labus adds that everyone needs to be careful as well, because without a mage, killing monsters is practically impossible. The boy's father asks if all the villagers know this. Labus says yes, but then someone asks about that one person. Old Labus asks who they mean. The man mentions the shepherd of Hill Hizaral, and there he is, Shepherd Turan, lying among his sheep, resting in the open air. As he lies there, Turan thinks to himself that all of this is incredibly boring. Same scenery, same day, over and over again. At this rate, he'll even forget how to hold a conversation. Just then, someone appears beside him and calls him a pathetic little brat, pointing out that the sun hasn't even started to set and he's already lounging around being lazy. It was old Labus. Turan looks up at the old man and tells him he's blocking the sunlight, so he should move. Labus calls him rude and asks if he still holds a grudge over that incident. Turan asks what incident. Is he talking about when his mother died and Labus tried to sell off her sheep? That left the old man pretty embarrassed. Turan sits up and confirms, yes, that's exactly what he means. He still holds resentment toward this old man, and he's not generous enough to pretend otherwise. And since they're not close enough to exchange pleasantries, Labus can say what he came to say and get out. The old man is infuriated by the disrespect, calling Turan an insolent little punk. Turan fires back with equal irritation, asking what he means by that. Labus, slightly flustered, simply says that a monster has appeared. Turan asks what he means. A monster. Labus explains they say it's a leopard the size of a house. He's heading back now after warning the villagers. Turan acknowledges that this is a serious problem. Labus says he's not afraid, even though he's probably the most likely target around. Turan doesn't know just how much courage the old man has. But regardless, the village chief has gone to the city to find a mage, so Turan should be careful, and Labus mentions that he came by because he was worried about him. Turan comments that the old man isn't very honest. Why doesn't he just admit he came for the sheep and not for him? With a scowl, he tells the old man to get out of his sight as fast as possible, because his breath smells so bad Turan's nose is practically falling off. The old man storms off grumbling under his breath, and Turan is left alone with his thoughts, drifting to monsters, magical beasts that wield mysterious powers and abilities. If humans have mages, then beasts have monsters. And if a mage is actually coming to his village because of a monster, then he might finally get to see one in person. Though if a backwater village chief is the one calling, there's a good chance the mage won't be anything special. Still, he's excited about the possibility. He wonders just how strong this mage will be. But as he was walking back home, he caught a very strange smell, the smell of blood. Calmly, he made his way toward the forest. The deeper he walked, the stronger the scent became. When he finally stopped, he realized it was Labus, cut clean in half. He mutters that the old man just told him to be careful, and he was the first one to die. So Labus was the source of the blood. But that wound couldn't have been made by a normal animal. It had to be the monster. While he was thinking that, a massive creature was closing in on him. Turan looks up, and sure enough, it was the monster. The body of a leopard, but the size of a house. Meanwhile, back in the village, that little boy was asking his father, how strong is a monster? Is it really true that even adults can't beat one? His father told him they're incredibly powerful. If ordinary adults tried to take one on empty-handed, there wouldn't even be bones left. The curious boy then asks if even his father couldn't beat it. Frightened, he asks what's going to happen to the village. His father tells him not to worry. The village chief will bring a mage quickly, the monster will be defeated, and everything will be fine. The boy asks nervously if the mage won't lose, right? And if the mage will really punish the monster. His father says of course he will. Mages are extraordinary beings born with magic in their very bodies. They can kill monsters with a single word. Back with our protagonist, the leopard monster charges straight at him. Turan faces it with complete calm, and he says, "Die." The monster swerves away from him instantly. Turan realizes nothing happened, so the monster charges again, lunging to bite him. Turan shouts once more, this time saying stop, and again the monster veers off. What a joke, trying to use magic like that. Turan admits he knew killing a monster wasn't going to work that way. He couldn't even stop it apparently. The leopard comes charging again, but Turan dodges the strike with ease. He says that in that case he'll pick up a rock. A shepherd should always do what a shepherd does best. With a small stone in his hand, staring down that enormous beast, he says, harden. Then he places the rock into his sling. His eyes light up as he says, accelerate. He takes aim as the monster comes barreling toward him. And finally he says, pierce. He hurls that stone at blinding speed, aimed directly at the monster's head. But the shot grazes the side of its neck, failing to finish it off. The monster seizes the opening and lunges at him again. But Turan, with a small smirk on his face, says he wasn't aiming for the neck. He was aiming for the head all along. And as the stone loops back in its arc, it slams directly into the leopard's eye and blows its head clean off. Standing over it, our protagonist remarks that this was his first time using that technique against a monster. He wonders if he should toss the body in a hole or something. In the end, this whole thing was more trouble than it was worth. Those good-for-nothing villagers made him work way too hard. But even as he said that, he began to think. Because he himself is a mage, he realized he had special abilities 8 years ago when he was just 10 years old. He had levitated several objects around his house, and thrilled by it, he asked his mother if she thought it was as amazing as he did. But his mother had gone completely still, just staring at what he was doing. He excitedly told her he could make fire and generate wind at the same time. And of course, Turan still has those memories crystal clear in his mind, because it was the first and last time his mother ever got angry with him. She told him to stop. She called his name, Turan, and asked him to put those things down. Then she calmly asked him, did he want to keep living with her for a long time? He told her of course he did, so she asked him to make her a promise. He must promise that from that moment on, he would never use that power again, and he would never use it in front of other people. This would be a promise between the two of them. Confused, Turan asked her why. His mother asked if he remembered the story of the noble and the warrior. He said he did. She reminded him that people call those who possess special powers mages, whether they are nobles or knights. But nobles and knights are fundamentally different. Nobles are descendants of divine beings, the Freya race, who descended from the heavens to save ancient humanity. Knights, on the other hand, are descendants of nobles whose bloodline mixed with that of common humans. She asked if he remembered that. That is precisely why nobles and knights hold different standings among mages. And now she was going to tell him why he could never use that power. It was because he inherited his abilities from his father, who was a knight. And out in the wider world, there are many wicked nobles. Those nobles treat knights like slaves. So he needed to remember, no one could ever know he was a mage. He had to promise her that. And so, 8 years passed since that day. He had kept that promise to his mother, even now that she was gone. But a promise is a promise. It would not be broken. He had no desire to reveal that he was a mage, nor any desire to leave this mountain. But sometime later, while he was resting at home, someone began pounding loudly on his door, demanding that Turan come out. When he opened it, he found himself surrounded by a group of men. Tired and annoyed, he asked what they were doing there. Were they seriously saying he killed Labus? What kind of nonsense was that? The man at the front grabbed him immediately and called him shameless. He said Turan had wounded old Labus and left him to be devoured by the monster. But Turan told them he knew exactly why they wanted to pin this on him. The man in front asked what he meant. Turan said the elder had died alone, while the young men had all been too afraid of the monsters. He understood why they thought this was the best way out. It was the easiest way to shift the blame from themselves onto him. At that, the man in front swung at Turan, but Turan dodged the strike effortlessly, thinking to himself how convenient magic really is. He headbutted the man and thought to himself that if he says the right thing, it only costs a little mana. So he whispered quietly, fall. And just like that, the man crumpled to the ground without a fight. Turan figured that this way he didn't need to cause a real scene. With just a small touch of magic, barely enough to keep them from dying, he could dominate them and take them all down without much effort. And this was how, for 8 long years, he had hidden the fact that he was a mage. He tells the group they should have used their strength for Labus's funeral instead. Then he glances to the side and notices the women who came along. He asks if they came to fight too. The man in front says no, that's not it. They came to see him. Turan just tells the women to take the men away. Walking back inside, he thinks to himself that things are going to be chaotic in the village again. They'll probably use this to try and cheat him during trade. But that's fine, he doesn't care. When the time comes, he can beat some sense into them until he gets a fair deal. He already roughed them up once, so they shouldn't be back for a while. But while he was thinking all that, someone knocked at the door again. Turan grumbles that they must have lost their minds. He walks over, swings the door open, and demands to know who it is, asking if they really want to die. But to Turan's surprise, it's a complete stranger. Caught off guard, he asks who the man is. The stranger is polite and says excuse me, and that he was hoping to ask a favor. But it seems he's arrived at a difficult moment. Curious, Turan looks the man over and figures he might be a traveler. He apologizes and says it's nothing, that some very unpleasant people had just been there. He remembers his mother taught him good manners, though he wonders now if he did the right thing by using them. He never treated anyone in this miserable village with any particular kindness, so this still feels strange to him. But this traveler is a bit unusual. He's carrying a sword, out here in this completely remote village. Turan asks if perhaps the man is looking for a tavern. The traveler confirms that's exactly it. So Turan lets him in and prepares some food, telling him that he's not in the best situation right now, so there isn't much to offer. The traveler says it looks like a full banquet to him, and that Turan really surprised him. He asks if Turan has never met anyone from outside the village. Turan says that's right. He was born and raised on this mountain, and has always lived as a shepherd. Visitors are also extremely rare in this village. The traveler watches him for a moment. Even the way he drinks seems remarkably refined. He tells Turan that he's genuinely interesting, and that for someone who grew up as a shepherd, he has excellent manners. His parents must have raised him very well. Turan says he learned from his mother. The traveler glances around and notices there's no sign of her. Turan tells him she passed away a few years ago from an illness. The traveler says that a woman who raised a fine son like him must surely be with the gods now, in a heavenly palace. After a while, as Turan washes the dishes, the traveler says he'd like to thank him again. Turan says he lives alone the way his mother taught him, so it's no trouble at all, but he's quite curious. What brings the man to this village? The traveler says someone asked him for a favor. Turan asks what kind of favor. As far as he can recall, they were looking for someone to deal with the leopard monster, or something like that. And then, to Turan's shock, the traveler tells him he's a mage. Turan goes completely still. After a moment, he says that then he must be the mage the village elder was talking about. The traveler confirms that's right, but he also says he's curious about something, and asks if he can ask a question. Turan says of course. The mage tells him that he can sense a monster in this area, but he can't actually see one. And what's even stranger is that Turan already knew about the village elder and the monster, yet he seems completely calm and composed. If the monster wanted a human target, it would have gone after the easiest one first. But Turan clearly isn't afraid. He seems far too self-possessed for a shepherd who's never left his village. So the mage asks him very seriously, who exactly is he? Hearing that question, Turan has a flashback to the time he asked his mother why no one could ever know he was a mage. His mother told him it was because of the wicked nobles. Turan had asked, curious, wicked in what way? She explained that if nobles are like shepherds, then knights are like their sheep. The nobles can treat them with love, like family, but they can also sell them off or sacrifice them whenever it suits them. And she certainly did not want that kind of life for her son. She just wanted him to keep living with her, the way things had always been. Didn't he want that too? He said of course he did. So she told him to remember, once again, no one could ever know he was a mage, especially not other mages, because if they found out, they would take him away, and turn him into a sheep that could be discarded at any moment. And so, back in the present, Turan stares at the traveler with a cold, serious gaze, and he thinks to himself that to keep from being discovered, he may have to kill this man. Turan's mind races as he tries to figure out how things ended up like this, but the mage, noticing his silence, asks him why he isn't answering. Then, looking almost embarrassed, the mage says that if Turan makes that face, it really kills the mood of his joke. Turan blinks, confused, and asks, what joke? He apologizes to the man and admits he doesn't have the best sense of humor. The mage stands up and says no, that's not it. He's the one who should apologize. He thinks he may have genuinely scared him. Turan says it's actually the first time he's ever heard someone joke about being a mage, so he was completely caught off guard. The mage laughs and says that Turan's reaction was priceless, but he did take the joke a bit too far. He pauses and points out that they still haven't introduced themselves. He says it's a pleasure to meet him, and tells him his name is Kiran, a wanderer. Turan apologizes as well, saying he should have introduced himself earlier. He tells Kiran his name and that he's a shepherd. With the tension finally broken, the two of them sit back down and continue eating. Turan mentions he's 18 this year, while Kiran is 65. Turan is visibly surprised, telling him he doesn't look nearly that old. Kiran explains that mages age more slowly than ordinary people, and they live much longer lives as well. Curious, Turan asks how Kiorn became a wanderer. Kiorn tells him that after 60 years of serving House Arabian, he simply walked away. He wanted to travel from place to place with no particular destination. Turan says that sounds wonderfully free. As they talked, Turan realized he had been having a genuinely light-hearted conversation with this person, someone he was beginning to think of as a good man. He never really noticed before just how much fun something like this could be. When evening came, Kiorn said it was getting late and he should head out. Turan agreed, surprised that the sun was already rising again by the time he noticed. Before leaving, Kiorn placed a silver coin on the table. He said it was a particularly pure piece of silver, so it should more than cover the cost of the meal. Turan accepted it and wished him good luck on his hunt. But Kiorn told him not to say it like they'd never see each other again. He asked if he could stop by again the next time he was in the area. After Kiorn left, Turan returned to his daily routine. Just a simple shepherd who also happened to know magic. He called out "gather" to his sheep, and they seemed to listen, moving in around him. But unlike other days, he found himself in unusually high spirits. He thought about how this was the first time he'd ever met another mage. And beyond that, he wondered how long it had been since he'd had a genuinely good conversation. The ease, the warmth, the humor that seemed to come naturally to Kiorn, more than any other adult Turan had ever met. That man was truly a good person, and true to his word, he came back regularly with fresh game as a gift. Turan had always assumed knights were nothing but emotionless hunting dogs in service to arrogant nobles, but apparently that wasn't always the case. In any case, Turan found himself wondering how to tell Kiorn that there were no more monsters on Hill Hizaro. Meanwhile, out in the forest, Kiorn was walking with a very uneasy feeling. He could see clear signs of a battle, but he couldn't sense any monster presence. He wondered if perhaps the monster had already been hunted down, but by whom? Had the village chief called in another mage besides him? Either way, he thought, it's a relief. If someone killed the monster and things are safe, that's all that matters. But then to his shock, Kiorn suddenly sensed the monster's presence. He spun around, and there it was, the same leopard but now completely disfigured, standing right in front of him. Kiorn immediately recognized it as a monster specter. Baffled, he asked himself who could have done something like this. The specter attacked without warning. Kiorn barely dodged in time, and as he moved, his mind worked through the situation. If the mana in a monster's corpse isn't absorbed or dispersed, it transforms into a specter. Any mage who hunts monsters should know this, so whoever killed this monster was definitely a mage. That much was certain. But then why had they left the body to turn into a specter? Did they not know it could happen? He doubted that. A rookie knight who didn't even know the basics couldn't have killed a monster of this caliber in the first place. So it was someone else. Someone who may have had darker intentions. Either way, he had no choice but to destroy it now. If he didn't, it would slaughter the villagers. He conjured a magic arrow and fired it at the specter. But he quickly realized the magic had been nullified. The specter's mana was far stronger than his own. And then something even more alarming. The monster vanished. He realized he was trying to fight magic with magic, but he couldn't locate it. Then he felt it. Right beneath him, hiding silently inside his own shadow, the specter was coiling up to strike. With a split-second reflex, Kiorn managed to barely throw himself out of the way. But he was still hit and wounded. He thought to himself that this specter was operating at a level that could only be matched by a noble. A low-ranking noble at minimum. The idea that he'd encounter a specter this powerful in some random rural village. You really never know what life is going to throw at you. Now face to face with it again, Kiorn thought, this is it. He wasn't just going to die here. He thought with fury that if he had to go, he wasn't going alone. He began channeling the most powerful magic he could muster. His plan was to concentrate every last bit of his mana into his hand and drive it straight through the monster the moment it lunged at him. The specter launched itself at him. Kiorn braced himself, ready to give his life alongside the monster's. But in that fraction of a second, something brilliant shot out from the trees and slammed directly into the specter, sending it crashing to the ground. Kiorn was stunned. Someone appeared and asked if he was alright. Kiorn turned around and, with a dry smirk, said that a shepherd's punchline is pretty good too. He immediately recognized Turan. Surprised, he said so. Turan really was a mage. Turan confirmed it. Kiorn asked why he hadn't told him. But seeing Turan stay silent, Kiorn said never mind. He'd change his question. He wanted to know why Turan helped him. He could have just walked away on his own. And thinking on that, Turan recalled the time they had spent together as something close to friends. He remembered asking Kiorn once why he traveled so far out of his way. Kiorn had asked what he meant. Turan said he didn't know what the village chief had promised him, but with his abilities he could make far more money in much easier ways. Kiorn just laughed. He said it was simple. He felt sorry for them. Turan asked if he was serious. Kiorn said yes. People living on the frontier, trembling with fear, with no protection at all. Turan countered that it wasn't their fault. Kiorn agreed, but said that a mage is by nature someone who has inherited the power of the gods, so they should live with pride, protecting those who are powerless. Not every mage sees it that way, of course. Everyone has their own way of thinking, and their own way of living. And remembering that, back in the present, Turan told Kiorn that he was the one who said it, that everyone has their own way of living. But right then, to both of their surprise, the monster hadn't actually died. They both dove out of the way in time. Kieran told Turan to listen carefully. They could not handle this monster between the two of them. It was impossible to fight it without the power of a noble. He ordered Turan to go report to the village chief and help coordinate the evacuation. He would hold the specter here. He said it with conviction, but deep down he wasn't sure how long he could actually hold out. But then, to Kieran's surprise, Turan said it was fine. He said that if that last attack had connected, they would have been finished. He wanted to check something. Kieran, confused, asked what he was talking about. Was Turan seriously saying that wasn't his full power? He asked himself, could a young knight hiding in the mountains really hunt a specter that even nobles would struggle with? That was the thought running through the veteran knight Kieran's mind in that moment. But what he was witnessing now wasn't just some surprising connection made in a rural village, nor was it merely the courage of a young knight running from the nobles. What he was watching was something monstrous unfolding before his very eyes. And perhaps, he thought, this could be the beginning of a mage who would turn the entire world upside down. There in front of Cairn, Turan looked ahead with quiet confidence and said he'd always been curious about something. He wanted to find out just what his own limits really were. And with that, several rocks began orbiting around Shepherd Turan. He told Kiorn that he was going to test his limits right now, but a worried Kiorn said he couldn't let him do something like that. No matter how remarkable his talent, this opponent was extremely powerful. They needed to work together. But the moment the specter tried to attack, Turan struck it with a rock, and Kiorn realized that if he joined in right now, he would only get in the way. He hadn't even been able to react to that last move of Turan's. In front of a monster like this, Kiorn was genuinely useless. What he needed to do now was make sure nothing got in the way of Turan's talent. He needed to protect the conditions for it to bloom. Turan launched another strike at the leopard specter, then muttered in frustration that it wasn't working. He dodged another swipe from the creature. Kiorn told him he couldn't kill a specter with physical attacks. Turan immediately asked how then. Kiorn said fire, or electric type abilities, those work as well. So Turan activated fire magic and unleashed it on the monster. But he said that wasn't working either. Kiorn told him that wasn't the point. He explained that to apply a mage's power to another living being, you need to establish a proper connection first. That's a basic requirement of magic. He asked himself in disbelief if Turan really didn't know even the fundamentals. And then it clicked. If Turan was the one who killed this monster and left it to become a specter, that meant he had never absorbed mana in his life. Kiorn told him not just to create fire, but to actually throw it. Even without ever having absorbed mana, Turan was already this powerful. He had a completely innate, extraordinary talent. This young man was an absolute monster in his own right. Turan dropped to the ground and channeled fire magic into his palm. He thought to himself, if you're a mage, producing fire shouldn't be hard, but controlling it takes separate training. And yet Kiorn watched in disbelief as Turan seemed to manage it immediately on his own. With his full focus locked onto the fight, Turan hurled what was essentially a spinning fireball at the monster. The moment it made contact, the specter began to burn. Even in its rage and pain, it kept driving forward toward Turan. Kiorn shouted at him to maintain his focus and keep feeding mana into the fire so it didn't go out. He had to burn the specter completely. Turan intensified his output, and the flames grew. He incinerated the leopard specter until, finally, after a sustained effort, it was over. They had won. Even Kiorn was stunned. He knew that specter had been absurdly powerful. Under normal circumstances, the strength of a noble would have been required. And yet this kid had taken it down alone. Turan, looking completely drained, asked if it was really over this time. Kiorn told him that if he didn't want to run into another specter, he needed to absorb the mana first. Turan curiously asked how. Kiorn told him to imagine draining the target. Picture it flowing into him. Turan did exactly as he described. The monster's mana began drifting in his direction, and he absorbed it steadily and completely. He could feel it entering his body, spreading through every part of him. Kiorn walked over, visibly shaken, and asked if Turan felt lighter now. He said he genuinely could not believe what he was seeing. He asked if this really was Turan's first time ever absorbing mana. Turan said yes, it was. Kiorn thought to himself, after a mage's awakening, their mana grows slowly over time, and the best way to grow stronger is to kill monsters or other mages and absorb their mana. But this was Turan's very first absorption, and he had already been handling magic at this level. That meant Turan possessed a raw, innate talent that defied all reason. This young man was, in every sense of the word, a complete monster. Kiorn told Turan that he had been quite rude to him. He asked what house he belonged to, but Turan just looked at him and told him to clean his wound first. And so, after some time, back at Turan's home, Kiorn, who Turan had treated, apologized for his lack of manners earlier, for making someone of Turan's caliber take care of him like that. He said he could only offer his apologies, but young shepherd Turan told him to stop. He wasn't someone of any particular caliber. He was just a shepherd who had never even met his father. He asked Kiorn to please drop it, and he said it firmly. Kiorn backed off and told Turan not to look at him like that, but he still wanted to know, what was a mage as powerful as him doing living as a shepherd? He said he meant no disrespect, but it really didn't fit. Turan told him it was his mother's request. She had asked him to live this way for as long as she lived. Kiorn looked surprised and asked why she would ask something like that. Turan explained that out in the wider world there are nobles, and if it's revealed that you're a mage, you'll be used until you're no longer useful, and then discarded. Kiorn said she was truly wise. That surprised Turan, who admitted he thought Kiorn would say she was just being overprotective. Kiorn said her instincts weren't wrong. mages hold great power, and great power draws inevitable conflict. About 20 years ago, there was a major war between two noble houses, and they were enormous houses at that. The war was between House Arabian, which he had served, and the great House Zahar. Many people died in that war. Of roughly 3,000 Arabian knights, nearly 1,000 were killed, almost a third of all their knights, and sadly, nearly everyone he was close to was among that third. His friend Denver, who used to say he'd open a laundry business once the war was over. His teacher Hartman, who was always scolding him and saying he still had so much to learn, and his beloved family, his wife and his son. They were all massacred by House Zahar, and only he survived. That is why, in a sense, Turan's mother was right. The life of a knight can be cut short far more suddenly than the life of a commoner. But there was one thing she had been wrong about. Curious, Turan asked what. Kaorn said it was embarrassing to admit given his current state, but Turan was a knight of considerable ability, and yet Turan had just single-handedly destroyed the monster specter that even Kaorn himself couldn't defeat. His potential wasn't simply that of a knight. At minimum, he was at the level of a noble, and among nobles, his potential was, without question, top tier. Turan, reacting with his usual complete lack of expression because of how strange he was, pointed out that his mother said his father was a knight. He asked if perhaps that had been a lie. Kieran said that in rare cases, a child born among nobles can manifest abilities far below what a noble should have, and a child of noble class ability can be born among knights. With that in mind, Kieran said he thought it would be better for Turan to leave this mountain and see the world. Turan asked why. Kieran said it was because they, humans, were more than just knights and nobles, and humans weren't yet the masters of this world. But he caught himself and apologized for getting off track. The point was that Turan didn't know much about magic, so Kieran would explain. A lineage ability is a trait that nobles inherit from their ancestors, the Freya race. Whether or not a person possesses such an ability is what separates nobles from knights. He asked Turan if there was any technique that seemed to come to him far too easily, or felt almost effortless when he used it, or perhaps some incredible ability that activated without him even needing to use mana deliberately. Turan said so it wasn't just that he was strong. Kieran said that mana alone enhances a mage's physical capabilities. So Turan asked what counted, and mentioned he had an excellent sense of smell and was good at throwing rocks. Kieran said that if his sense of smell was abnormally sharp, that could indeed be a lineage ability, and being naturally skilled with thrown weapons was a characteristic of House Arabian, though a fairly common one. He asked Turan to tell him more. After a while of talking through everything and analyzing the details, Kieran went quiet. Turan asked why he was reacting like that. Kieran was clearly troubled. Kieran said he thought he understood now. He said he thought he knew which house was behind Turan's abilities. Turan asked which house. Kieran said it was a great house, one known by the name of pursuers, or hunters. House Zahar, the very house that had gone to war against House Arabian. Turan was stunned, because that meant in essence that he was connected to Kieran's enemy, or at least he carried the bloodline of the people who had been. With House Zahar on his mind, Turan told Kieran that he was essentially saying Turan shared the same bloodline as his enemies. So that's why Kieran looked so downcast. Nervously, Turan wondered to himself what he was even supposed to say. Should he apologize for what relatives he had never even met had done? But Kieran spoke first. He told Turan not to worry about it. He hadn't even been part of that war. Turan still seemed uncomfortable and started to say something anyway. But Kieran cut him off and said this was a matter for adults. If they tried to wash away blood with more blood, the war would never end. Turan asked him quietly if he had any regrets. Kieran asked what he meant specifically. Turan said, about surviving, about being the one left to wander the world while everyone else was gone. Kieran told him that if Turan left the mountain and went after power, he would inevitably end up crossing paths with House Zahar, given those extraordinary abilities of his. But Kieran said he trusted him. Turan asked what he meant. Kieran said he was talking about the goodness he saw in him. After all, Turan had saved his life, even at the cost of revealing the identity he had hidden his entire life. And actually, if someone like Turan were to join House Zahar and rise to a position of real influence, perhaps he could prevent a catastrophic war like that from ever happening again. Turan sat with that for a moment. Kieran then said, well, they didn't have to keep talking about it. It wasn't as though Turan had decided this very moment to join House Zahar or anything like that, but Turan said his mind was actually very clear on one thing. He wanted to try leaving the mountain. Kieran smiled and said it sounded like he had thought it through. But Turan said, not yet. He would leave once Kieran's wound healed. Kieran laughed and said he was being too kind. It was just a scratch, nothing more. But still, he said, Turan was a genuinely good person. And so Kieran made the most of the time they had left together, teaching the boy everything he could. For instance, to use magic you need mana. That is why mana is often called the key to omnipotence. Not that it truly makes you omnipotent in the way the name suggests, but without it magic simply doesn't work. You need mana that is compatible with the spell you want to cast. Turan asked what the standard for compatible mana was. Kiorn said he'd explain it now. The difficulty of magic is determined by 3 factors. The first is lineage. The second is affinity. The third is causality. The first factor, lineage, is determined by the bloodline you were born into. This applies to most nobles who are not knights. For example, it would be quite difficult for Kiorn himself to heal his own wounds with magic. Turan acknowledged that made sense. But Kiorn told him that for those of the southern Ravis lineage, healing others is something they can do effortlessly, without any training at all. That is the power that comes from bloodline. Turan asked about the second one, affinity. Kiorn said he could also think of it as familiarity. It's a concept that describes how easily someone can perform a task when they're used to it, or when it suits them naturally. Turan asked if it was like when he threw that fireball by thinking of it as throwing a rock. Kiorn said exactly, and very likely if he had tried to produce simpler flames instead, he wouldn't have achieved that same speed and force. And then came the last factor, and the most important one, causality. Even Kiorn himself didn't fully understand it, so he asked Turan a question. What do you think would happen if you tried to kill someone directly using raw mana? Turan said probably some bright light would flash in his head and nothing else. Kiorn said that was exactly the phenomenon causality produces. When there is no appropriate cause, when what needs to be achieved is too direct, too abstract, that rule kicks in and prevents it. Turan said he roughly understood. So if he wanted to kill someone, instead of spending mana just willing death upon them, he'd need to establish a proper cause for that death, like creating fire and throwing it. Because creating and throwing fire is a more natural sequence of events than simply willing something to burn. Kiorn's eyes lit up and he said that was exactly right. He said Turan could have been a full-time magic scholar if he'd wanted to be. But then Turan mentioned something else. He said he was able to control ordinary animals according to his will. He asked if that meant magical beasts required something more. Kiorn told him that was because of mana. Magical beasts possess their own mana, which creates resistance. The two of them continued talking as one of the sheep outside looked on, completely unbothered by all of it. Later, Turan said with a sigh that magic really wasn't as simple as it seemed. Kiorn said a truly excellent mage doesn't just know how to use mana, they understand the principles and circumstances behind it. Then Turan paused and asked about his House Zahar ability, specifically about his lineage skill. Kiorn said House Zahar's members are skilled in stealth and pursuit. He told Turan to try it once. Turan said alright. He also wanted his sounds and his scent to go undetected, and he pushed mana into that as well. And just like that, he disappeared from the room. Even Kiorn was stunned at how easily it worked. He said out loud that he actually couldn't see him at all. A moment later, Turan reappeared. Kiorn said it had been a long time since he last witnessed that ability. It really was something that sent chills down his spine. During the war, House Arabian's knights had been terrified of that very power. Turan said it seemed like a pretty unfair ability to have. Kiorn told him not to get overconfident. Being invisible didn't make him invincible. He needed to remember that clearly. But then Kiorn said he would now begin teaching him some methods of magical training. Turan asked if Kiorn wasn't worried about teaching all of this to a mage from an enemy house. Kiorn said that Turan had saved his life and looked after him. He asked if Turan had forgotten what he said. He truly trusted him, and so time passed. Eventually one day, the village elder found Turan and demanded to know what he was talking about. Was he really going to sell the sheep and just leave like that? Who would be the shepherd from now on? How could he make a decision like this without even consulting them? Turan told them they'd figure out how to find a new shepherd on their own. He asked them if it was really their business what he did with his own belongings. In any case, he hoped they'd be willing to buy the sheep at a fair price. If not, he would release all of them and walk away, and they could try to round them up themselves, though he warned them it would be very difficult. The village elder thought to himself that this damn kid was someone who meant every word he said. There was nothing to gain from making him angry, so he said fine, he understood. Whether Turan stayed or left was his own choice, and he wasn't going to interfere. And with that, Turan left the village alongside Kiorn. As they walked, Turan said now that he thought about it, the villagers still owed him after everything that had happened. He asked if he should go back and collect. Kiorn said he had no intention of collecting anything. He was the one who had failed to hunt the magical beast. Turan had done practically everything, but after walking together for a while, they reached the point where they would have to go their separate ways. Kiorn apologized for declining Turan's offer to travel together. He said he simply felt more at ease on his own. Turan told him not to worry about it. He said he was genuinely grateful for everything. Kiorn told Turan to take care of himself, to live as long as he possibly could. Turan called him old man, and told him he hoped they'd get to meet again someday, somewhere happy. And so it was that Turan stood there and watched Kiorn's silhouette gradually fade into the distance for a long time. And it was only afterward that he understood why he hadn't wanted the old knight to speak to him formally. Because even though he had never lacked for his mother's love, there had always been a quiet longing in him for a father figure, someone who could show him the kind of man he wanted to become. And with that, our protagonist set out on his journey, walking alone, a lone traveler, an isolated wanderer, essentially a mage with no ties left to hold him. As he walked through an arid stretch of land scattered with enormous boulders that jutted up like rough stone pillars, he spotted a group of people up ahead. He wondered if they were nomadic merchants who traveled between villages. villages. That was convenient, he could ask them for directions. The man at the front of the group asked why he was blocking their path. Turan said he was traveling alone and asked where the nearest city was. The man told him that if he followed the road they came from, he'd reach a city called Murray. Turan thanked him and turned to leave. But before he could get past everyone, one of them called out for him to wait. He asked if Turan was really just going to walk off after getting what he wanted. Turan asked what he meant. The man said when you receive something, you should give something in return. And with that, every one of them drew their weapons. The leader told him to first hand over his bag. Turan asked flatly if they were bandits. One of them asked what he could possibly do about it if they were. The leader, the older man who had given him directions, said Turan could call him careless if he wanted, but they were out in the middle of a wasteland where no one would ever find his body, so he should hand over the bag and walk away while they were still being civil. Killing him and stripping his clothes would just be more work than it was worth. Turan took that in and said, so they were bandits who would kill people. Got it. And remembering everything Kiorn had taught him, he said out loud that their coming to him actually worked out well, because now he had some training partners to practice on. But after Turan says that, the old man calls him a lunatic, talking like he's some kind of mage, while the rest of his goons just laugh it off, only for our boy to quickly say wind, launching all of them into the air. He thinks to himself that instead of generating wind from the air around him, he can shape it directly with his hand and amplify it using far less mana. He never knew he could produce wind this strong with so little mana, but in the end it actually worked out. After they all land in shock, they're left wondering what the hell just happened. But right after that, our boy opens a small flask and draws out a few drops of water. He shapes them into something that looks pretty strange. Then they crystallize into water shards. He hardens them with magic and launches them at the first guy, punching multiple holes right through his body. After the first one drops dead, our boy wonders to himself whether this spell would actually be that useful in places where water is scarce. But honestly, just pulling rocks out of the ground seems way faster and hits way harder. Watching all of this, the boss is absolutely terrified. He stammers that they had no idea he was a mage, so he begs, please just forgive them this once. They'll do whatever he wants. But while the old man was trying to keep his attention, the other three attacked from behind. The old man kept screaming for them to stop. Sensing it coming, our boy stomps the ground hard, and from the earth, a row of spikes shoots up and pierces through all three bandits, killing them instantly. Staring at the scene, the boss is completely in shock. All of his men dead, killed by a single mage he thought was just some random kid. Our protagonist walks up calmly and says he has a question. The old man says he'll answer anything at all. So Turan asks why they attacked without even a plan. Any traveler could be a mage. The man says it's because he bowed his head. Our boy looks confused and asks what he means. The bandit explains that even when they talked down to him, he just bowed and greeted them politely. So they assumed he was completely ordinary. Our boy thanks him. That was actually a very useful lesson. Happy to have helped, the bandit asks if he's really going to let him go. But the moment he looks up, a few droplets of water are hovering right against his forehead. Meanwhile, our boy is remembering Kaar's words. Back when he told him that from now on he'd meet all kinds of different people, and that there was something he needed to understand, that he could never afford to show mercy to people like bandits. The type of person who doesn't hesitate to hurt others just for profit, doesn't deserve pity, and doesn't deserve to live. And the reason he was saying this, but our protagonist had cut him off and said he understood. He knew exactly what it meant, because a life he spares out of pity might end up hurting other good people down the line. After he finishes off the rest of them, our boy sighs and mutters that he already wasted too much time here. As he walked through the desert, he found the road the merchant bandits used, just the tracks their wagon wheels had carved into the sand. He followed them, but as he made his way toward the city, something started weighing on his mind. Not something, someone, the people he had killed along the way. And he felt guilt. Yes, he actually felt guilt, but he couldn't have let them walk away, because he remembered Kaur's warning, that people like that can decide without a second thought, to rob or kill for profit. And those same people he might spare out of pity, could target someone else at any moment. As the wagon track slowly disappeared behind him, the storm inside Turan's chest gradually settled, the teachings of Kaur echoing in his mind, and that's how he finally arrived somewhere new. Looking at it from a distance, he could tell it was a fairly large place. He was surprised, though in reality, it was just a small city, a place called Murray. Walking through the city for the first time, he sees more people at once than he ever has in his life. Even the architecture is completely different from anything in his old village. And now, for real, it actually feels like he's in a city. Making his way through the center, he heads toward a fruit vendor. When he gets there, the vendor welcomes him and asks what he can do for him. Our boy says he's not a customer. He remembers Kaur telling him that when he arrives in a city and needs to rest, he should look for a tavern, and that no matter where he is, there's usually one somewhere in town. But the annoyed vendor tells him to get lost if he's not buying anything. Turan stands there completely lost, wondering why this guy is so rude. He starts to think that maybe there's some unwritten rule in cities where you're required to buy a piece of fruit before asking for directions. So he asks how much that fruit costs. The vendor says 2 dupit, and that he looks like an outsider, so he probably doesn't know the exchange rate. Other currencies are accepted too. Our boy then asks where he can find a tavern. The The vendor tells him to go down the street, past the cloak shop, then turn left. After a little while, our boy arrives at the tavern, where he's greeted by a pretty girl named Lena. She looks him over and says he's quite a handsome customer. Our boy asks how much a room costs per night. She says 16 dupit. He says he'll take it. But more importantly, there's something he wants to ask. He wants to know if there are any monsters nearby with bounties on their heads. Lena looks confused and asks what he means by monsters. Meanwhile, Turan knows he needs to hunt monsters and absorb their mana to get stronger. And on top of that, it can make him money too. He asks her why she's not answering. She very politely calls him sir and tells him that nothing in this world is free. So after he buys a few drinks, she explains the town hall to him. He frowns and asks what that is. She looks at him like he can't be serious. Does he really not know what a town hall is? Is he really that much of a country boy? But she tells him anyway. The town hall is where public matters are handled. The officials there are employed by the city's lord. It's probably closed by now, but he can stop by tomorrow if he wants to find a monster hunting contract. Curious, she asks if he's a monster hunter then. He asks what that is. She tells him there's a saying that if an ordinary person hunts monsters, they can become a mage. And she wants to know if that's what he's after too. But to both of their surprise, someone behind him chimes in that sure, anyone dumb enough to believe that kind of superstition is an idiot. Then a big hand lands on his shoulder and a voice asks what he means by superstition. That it's a very real fact. This guy is a monster hunter named Medan. And he tells our protagonist that he's living proof of it with his own 2 eyes. Lena looks surprised and says she can't believe Medan is actually still alive. He tells her he said he wasn't going to die until he became a mage. Our boy just asks him to get his hand off him. The guy apologizes, a little embarrassed, but more importantly, Turan wants to hear more about what he just said. Medan asks if he means the part about becoming a mage by hunting monsters. He explains that mages grow stronger by hunting monsters, and by the same logic, if an ordinary person kills monsters, they can become a mage too. And that the 4 of them are out here hunting monsters for exactly that reason, to become mages. Turan asks if that means any of them have already become a mage. Medan says not a chance. In this city, only the Lord and his 3 mages have that status. But then he asks Turan a little awkwardly if he said he was a monster hunter, because from what he can see, that equipment is way too rough for the job. And where's his weapon? Our boy points to the sling he uses to throw rocks. Medan asks if he seriously uses a sling to hunt monsters, but judging by how confident he seems, it looks like he's been through some real fights. Our boy says that's right, and that it's good for firing something about the size of an egg at high speed. He mentions that with it, he can hunt monster rabbits and foxes just fine. Truth be told, Medan says they've been needing another ranged fighter. He asks if he'd be interested in hunting with them, but our boy politely declines. At the end of the day, back in his room, he thinks there's no reason to hunt with those guys. They don't even know him, and he also doesn't want them to find out he's a mage. Still, he can't believe he actually left his village. He's genuinely uncertain about what comes next. But as he's trying to fall asleep, he hears a knock at the door and asks who's there. And once again, a memory of Kaur flashes through his mind. Back when he asked whether he needed to stay on guard even inside a tavern, and Kaur said yes, absolutely. Cities aren't necessarily safe places. He should never let his guard down. Our boy goes to the door with his magic already primed. He opens it and comes face to face with whoever's on the other side. He wonders what Lena is doing there. She smiles and asks if he's already asleep. She says she just stopped by because she thought he might be cold. So she came to warm him up a little. Turan stands there completely lost and asks what she means. Warm him up. Meanwhile, the girl gives him a very suggestive look. She looks him dead in the eye and says it's exactly what it looks like. He asks what exactly it looks like. She says that for a small sum of money, she'll do whatever he wants. He asks what if he doesn't want anything. She tells him not to lie because it's written all over his face. She's already reaching for him, but when he looks back at her, what's written all over his face is the expression of a monk, clearly a virgin, and she realizes pretty quickly that he genuinely doesn't want anything from her. And once again, another one of Kaur's memories forces its way into his mind. Back when he desperately told him to be careful, that he always needs to watch out for the tavern girls and the women who sell their company. Most of them carry diseases, and while their kind has high resistance, so it wouldn't affect them directly, if he's not careful, he could pass something along to another woman, one he might actually care about. So he should never let desire take control of his body. Our boy thinks to himself that cities are harder to navigate than he expected. Lena storms back down the stairs, furious, but also embarrassed by our boy. Meanwhile, he thinks about how the fruit vendor earlier demanded money just for giving him directions. And now Lena tried to sell her body for money. And to think that he would put a price on simple questions and small talk. Big cities really are something else. But as he was thinking about all that, he started picking up on a nearby conversation. It was from the group of that guy he met earlier. One of them was asking why he even recruited that guy. Honestly, he seemed pretty useless. The others agreed, yeah, he talks too much. That actually makes him perfect as bait. But their leader says it's because he reminds him of his younger self, and that the fact he hunts with a weapon like that actually caught his attention. If that guy is even 1% of what he is, he's going to survive. His friends say he's way too soft, but our boy smiles to himself, thinking that Midin, it turns out, isn't so bad after all. Maybe big cities aren't quite as ignorant as he thought they'd be. The next day, our boy heads to the town hall. When he gets to the front desk, a mustachioed official asks how he can help. Our boy asks if he's an official. The guy asks what he looks like, but Turan cuts straight to it and says he wants to hunt monsters. The official asks what he means by monsters, and another memory of Kaar surfaces in his mind. Back when he said the world isn't going to be kind to him. Our boy had asked why, and Kaar said because you have to think about it. There's no reason for anyone to just be kind for free. If you want people to treat you well, the method is simple. He needs to reveal that he's a mage. Only then will ordinary people treat him like a god. But since he hasn't revealed that yet, the official says he can't take the paperwork with him. He can look it over and then give it back. Our boy asks about a particular monster, the raven. The guy gets annoyed and asks if he can't tell the difference. Does it look like a cat to him? He says it's highly unlikely, but if he kills this monster, he needs to bring the body back to the city. If a mage doesn't dispel it with mana, it becomes a monster specter. And if you kill a monster and abandon the body, that's a crime. You'll be executed. Our boy clearly already knows this. He knows exactly what happens when a monster becomes a specter. That's a mistake he absolutely cannot repeat. Curious, he asks about the knights. Don't they hunt monsters? The official asks if he thinks they have time for that. The job of a knight is to maintain public order inside the city. How is he supposed to go hunting monsters outside the walls? And while people like this guy give them extra work on top of that, so the official watches Turan walk out and mutters that unfortunately, another body is going to rot outside the city walls. But he swallowed those words the very same day, because our boy walked back in and delivered the raven he'd asked for. He and the other officials couldn't believe it. How the hell did he bring it back so fast? He asks Turan if he killed it alone. Our boy says yes, that's right. Turan asks curiously how he collects the reward. Another official rushes off saying he'll go get it right now. He comes back and says here's the reward. He must have worked really hard. Please, get some rest. Our boy thanks him. After he leaves, the three of them keep staring at the raven, commenting on how incredible the condition is. Even the wings are completely intact. They didn't even know it was possible to bring back a raven in this state. But then they notice Turan is still standing there, watching them. They ask him why he hasn't left yet. He wants to know if there aren't more monsters to hunt. This surprises the officials quite a bit. They ask if he seriously wants to hunt more. After a long day of hunting, Lena tells him that what he just ordered is the most expensive thing on the menu, and that she never would have imagined someone like him could take down a monster. Or better yet, 30 monsters in 3 days. He must have made a ton of money. Meanwhile, our boy is sitting there working through the entire feast by himself. He tells Lena that money isn't his only goal, because he knows that what he's really after is the mana from those monsters. And thanks to that, he's definitely gotten a lot stronger. Compared to when he was with KR, his mana has grown significantly, but he can feel a ceiling starting to form. With only the mana from weak monsters, getting much stronger is going to be really difficult. After a while, he asks her whether she by any chance stole some of this food. She says no, he ate every single bite himself, and that he might be scrawny, but he definitely eats like a pig. The cook nearby says it's been a long time since he's prepared a feast like this, and that it makes him happy to see someone enjoy it so much. Our boy says it was genuinely delicious. The cook says next time will be even better. But as our boy was heading upstairs to his room, someone grabbed him and stopped him, saying, well, eating all that good food by yourself, huh, skinny? And that he heard he's been making quite a bit of money lately. So how about sharing some with them? And he gets right up in his face. Our boy asks if he wanted a donation. Then here's his donation, but the other hunter moves to attack him fast, telling him to stop acting so high and mighty, only for our protagonist to dodge it effortlessly. With his arm raised, the guy slams his own head straight into it. And after he drops to the floor in pain, the second one comes at him with a wooden bench. Even easier this time, our boy stops the bench cold and flicks the guy in the forehead, sending him flying. Watching it all go down, Lena starts screaming that they absolutely cannot be fighting in the tavern. After a while, Midan himself had to go to our boy and apologize. He gave those two guys a serious talking to. He said sorry and promised it would never happen again. And that the problem is they've been really tight on money lately. He thinks they got jealous when they saw him, so he made both of them apologize. And the two of them, embarrassed, said they were sorry. But Turan, curious, asks if things have been rough for them. Midan says they're more just tight on funds. In about 3 days or so, they won't be able to pay for their stay anymore. But he knows that's his problem to deal with. Only for Midan to be completely caught off guard when our boy holds out some money. Shocked, he asks why he's doing this. Turan says it's payment for the kindness he showed when he tried to recruit him. Midan asks how he even knew about that. Our boy says nothing in this world is free, and what he wants in return is information. Midan lights up and says he's got plenty of that. He'll tell him everything right now. The next day, our boy is up on a high vantage point overlooking the city. Thinking that this is probably his last hunt here, Midan gave him a lot of information about the next city, so it's time to move on. And from everything he heard yesterday, Midan had way more useful intel than he he expected. Midun is a genuinely good person. He's just not as experienced as Kair. But that's exactly what makes him so pure and warm-hearted. But as he was thinking about all that, he caught a strange smell, and he realized it was the smell of blood. He silently prayed that he was wrong. But unfortunately, when he arrived at the spot, he took in the scene. One of Midan's group members was lying there with a gash across his stomach. And he knew this person was part of his group. So it seems it's true. Midan is dead. He walks up to his body and asks what the hell happened. That's when our boy notices someone nearby is still alive. Barely managing to say, "It was a rabbit." Our boy asks what he means. A rabbit. And then he sees it. A monster rabbit, tearing into the guts of one of the fallen members. And if a rabbit ever wanted to look anything but cute, this was it. This demonic rabbit stares our boy down with blood dripping from its mouth. Alarmed, our boy picks up on its monstrous speed and barely manages to dodge in time. That was way too close. This rabbit is definitely not normal. He loads his sling with a stone, and with everything he's got, he fires it straight at the rabbit like a guided shot. Turns out it wasn't just one stone, it was several, but the rabbit managed to block every single hit and even shattered the rocks clean. Our boy quickly realizes this thing is used to defending against projectile attacks, so he's going to have to switch things up. The rabbit charges at him ready to strike, but to its shock, our boy activates his concealment ability and vanishes from its sight entirely. A moment later, he reappears right behind it and drives a dagger straight into its neck. After the strike, he steps back to create some distance. The rabbit, incredibly fast, charges at him again trying to bite him. It misses, but it doesn't just hit the tree, it cuts it clean in half with a single bite. The fight between the rabbit and our boy keeps escalating. The rabbit keeps going for him, and Turan keeps dodging every time. After a good while, the rabbit collapses to the ground, exhausted and soaked in blood, dead. Our boy finally reappears and walks calmly over to it. He extends his hand and begins absorbing the monster rabbit's mana, and he immediately notices that the amount of mana being absorbed is completely different from anything before. It's even more than what he got from the leopard he encountered on his very first day out here. But while he was doing that, the one surviving member of Midan's group manages to say he can't believe it. So he really is a mage. Our boy says yeah. Curious, the survivor asks why he hid his identity. Our boy asks if any of the four of them have family he should pass their belongings to. But Karen, crying, says no. He just stares at his leader, the man who was the only family he had. Our protagonist stares at Midan too, and he remembers that yesterday, Midan had mentioned a large city nearby called Oren, and that it has a place called a library. Curious, Turan asked what a library was. Midan said it's a place that holds thousands of books, and from what Midan could tell, the moment he said the word books, Turan's whole demeanor shifted. Our boy asked if he really seemed that interested. Midan said he'd heard that not just anyone can get in. Our boy then asked how you get in, and Midan said apparently only mages are allowed inside. Turan said he understood, and thought to himself, well then, it sounds like he can get in. So just like that, he made up his mind. He's heading to the big city Midan told him about, the city of Oren. After he buries Midan and the others, he stands there with his head bowed, but he says quietly that he hopes wherever they are now, they find peace. Time passed, and the wandering Turan finally arrived at the city of Oren. He thinks to himself that it's almost embarrassing how much Murray surprised him, because Oren is on a completely different level. This is a real city. He genuinely didn't expect to see this many people just trying to get in. The place is packed, and those guards scanning everyone at the gate, they must be checking for wanted criminals. Exactly what you'd expect from a major city. The whole system is way more organized. Then it's Turan's turn, but to his surprise, he gets stopped. He asks what's wrong. The guard says he can't enter. He's never seen clothes that filthy in his life. He suggests he at least clean himself up before trying to come in. So our boy went and took a bath. And after that, he finally made it through the gates. The very first place he went was the Sky Library that Midan had told him about. He's stunned when he sees it. That tower is massive. He's pretty sure it was built using magic. He approaches. There's no gate. He politely asks to enter, but two guards block him immediately. Turan says he wants to go inside. The guard says the Sky Library is exclusive to mages. Our protagonist says he is a mage. The guard asks how so, and whether he actually wants to die for impersonating a mage, because there's absolutely no way someone like him is a mage. So the guard extends his hand toward Turan and begins activating a magic detection spell. Watching this, our boy remembers what Kaur told him, that mages can recognize other mages by sensing each other's mana, and they can even tell if the person in front of them is stronger than they are. So our boy activates his mana, letting the guard feel it clearly. The moment that immense pressure hits him, the guard drops to his knees in fear. He tells his partner everything's fine, but when he looks back up at Turan, he realizes this man is absolutely not a normal mage. He's at least a noble class practitioner. He straightens up immediately and introduces himself as Kenya, a knight of House Valtus, and he respectfully asks what house the visitor belongs to. Our boy asks if he really needs to say all that just to get inside. Kenya says no, then explains, visibly nervous, that in order to use the Sky Library, he needs the permission of the master of House Valtus. So he asks what he's supposed to do, and the guard says he'll contact House Valtus immediately. And so, a little while later, our boy is brought to House Valtus. He thought this was going to be a much simpler process. Clearly it is not, because right now he can't quite explain how he ended up here, being bathed by a team of maids. Very much not comfortable with this, he asks them to stop, and whether it would be okay if he washed himself. But the maids, clearly panicking, tell him that if they fail to properly attend to their esteemed guest, they'll be punished. So our boy gives up and tells them to do whatever they need to do. After one very uncomfortable bath, our boy is finally all cleaned up and dressed. Even the maid who's looking at him turns bright red, saying he looks absolutely incredible in those clothes. Our boy, not quite understanding that reaction, asks if there's something strange on his face. He's fully dressed like a noble now, but the maids, embarrassed, say no. It's just that they got completely lost in how beautiful he is, and they beg him to please forgive them. Our protagonist says there's nothing to forgive, but they beg him to please not speak to them so casually, because if he does, they could get in trouble. But while they were talking, someone finally walked into the room. She looked at Turan and asked what this was. So this is the guest who showed up looking like a beggar, and after a bath and some decent clothes, he now looks like a prince. But her butler, right behind her, tells the young lady she shouldn't say something like that. Our protagonist introduces himself to her as Turan. She says she's a Zella, and asks which house he belongs to. He tells her that for personal reasons, he'd prefer to leave that out. She looks surprised and says, "Is that so? What a shame." But in her head, she's already figured out that he's hiding who he really is. So she's definitely going to have a little fun with this. She activates her magic, pushing a wave of pressure toward Turan, thinking now she wants to see his real mana. The moment she releases that massive wave of pressure at him, our boy instantly activates his own power. He pushes his aura back against hers, meeting it head-on, which completely stuns everyone watching. But after a few moments, both auras fade, and our boy just sighs. Meanwhile, she is absolutely thrilled, because this kid is actually strong. Just like that, she calls him Sir, and asks if by any chance he'd like to marry her, which leaves our protagonist completely at a loss, not sure what to even say back to that. She laughs at his reaction and asks why that face. She thought he'd be surprised, but she also mentions that the spot next to her really is open right now, so he might want to think about it. And just like that, she walks away, leaving our boy standing there completely lost, wondering what the hell just happened. But then he looks down at his own hands and realizes they're trembling, and that her magical power is at least on the same level as his. He wonders to himself, is this really a normal human being? After that, later on, our protagonist heads to her father's office. This old man is the Lord of Orin, Rugvultus. He welcomes the young noble and asks his name. Our protagonist says his name is Turan. The Lord then asks if he's here to use the Sky Library. And since quite a few people have come in looking for strange things after hearing rumors, he wants to give a fair warning up front. There is no ancient magic and no shortcuts for increasing magical power inside the Sky Library. But Turan quickly says that's fine. He has no interest in any of that. The Lord says in that case there isn't anything he wouldn't be willing to give him. And for what it's worth, there isn't a single secret related to his family inside those walls anyway. But he says it's getting late. He asks him to rest tonight and that they'll meet again tomorrow. Turan says he won't forget the master of the house's kindness. So the next day, our boy finally gets to enter the Sky Library. He's greeted by both guards, who welcome him in. And just like that, Turan steps inside. And it's massive. Absolutely massive. Staircase after staircase inside. A tower completely stuffed with books from top to bottom. To Turan's surprise, someone approaches him at that moment and says, "So, this is your first time seeing something like this." This energetic little girl introduces herself as the librarian, and she says that per the orders of the family's master, she'll be going over the rules of using the space. But as our boy listens to her, he's genuinely caught off guard realizing that the librarian looks like a child. Still, she starts going through them. Rule 1, pay for any damages. Rule 2, removing books is strictly prohibited, and that while he's using the library, she'll continue keeping an eye on him. Our boy says yeah, got it, but asks that when he's actually reading, she keep a little distance. It's a bit odd. He also asks that if she's the librarian, she must have read a lot of the books here. She says of course, and that if he needs anything, helping him is literally her job. She then asks what he needs. Romance, history, whatever he wants. Or maybe something in the adult genre, which leaves our protagonist completely puzzled. He's never come across that particular category before. He simply says he wants to gain a basic understanding of the world. That's what he needs. A second later, a whole stack of books appears in front of him covering the fundamental knowledge of this world. She explains that a lot of the books here are hundreds of years old and may not be the best fit for the general overview he's looking for. But this section over here should help a bit. Our boy quickly thanks her. And so, at long last, he picks up a book and takes it in. So this is the famous thing called a book. The moment he opens it, he realizes it's genuinely remarkable. He's never seen anything like it. As time went on, Turan settled into the same routine every single day, spending the entire day reading inside the Sky Library. And for the first time, he was starting to understand the geography of this world, the various races, the etiquette of mages, how magical items are processed, even monsters, and relics from the ancient empire. And as he stacked one piece of knowledge on top of another, his world, something that had always been unclear and unknown to him, became vivid and sharp. Time passed, and one day, the head of the house called him in. He asked if he'd been making good use of the library. Our boy said yes, it's been incredible. But the head of the house said that while treating him like a noble and letting him use the library was an act of goodwill, he'd like that goodwill to be repaid. Our boy asks what he needs. The Lord explains that recently a magical beast has appeared to the north of Orin and has been attacking travelers on the road. Our boy asks if he wants him to hunt it. The Lord says 4 knights who went to subdue it were devoured and never came back. So he believes a noble class practitioner needs to step in, but he can only mobilize 2 right now. If he joins them, they'll have 3, which should be significantly safer. Our boy says he understands. He thinks to himself that protecting people is a mage's duty. But it does feel a little unusual. Normally mages wouldn't get involved in something like this. The Lord explains that it's because the northern road, where the merchant caravans travel, is Orin's only commercial trade route, and it's been blocked for 10 days now. They need to clear it quickly. Turan thinks, if it's been 10 days already, he needs to go now, and come back to read more books afterward. So that same day our boy heads out alongside 2 mages and a squad of knights, moving north. The girl riding ahead of him comments that her father is really something else. She never imagined he'd drag even a guest into hunting a magical beast. She asks if it's that they're not trustworthy enough on their own. But she quickly adds that she's not trying to say there's anything wrong with him being a guest. It's just that her father is way too dramatic. The young man beside her asks how she can call the head of the house dramatic. Those words are way too harsh, he tells his sister. She tells him to stay out of it, and he just goes quiet, staring at her. Then he turns to our boy and asks if this is his first time doing something like this. He introduces himself as Marvin Valtis. It's a pleasure to meet him. After the introductions, the young Valtis girl is trudging through the forest, looking completely miserable, thinking only of getting back home and sleeping in her own room. Behind her, Marvin asks Mr. Turan if by any chance he has any interest in his sister. Our boy immediately says no. Marvin says good. But right at that moment, something happens. 2 knights up ahead call for everyone to stop. When they do, they find a broken carriage. An older knight wonders aloud if this was the magical beast. The other thinks so, and based on how it's scattered across the northern road, it looks like it was attacked on the way down from the north. Behind them, our boy starts taking it all in, and in the middle of the wreckage, he spots a hand. He tells everyone, it's a monkey, which leaves the girl completely confused. She asks what he means, a monkey. Our boy says that the shape of that hand belongs to a monkey, and it looks like it attacked the merchants and retreated into the forest. He thinks they should track it, but the girl asks how. She can barely keep up with the magic she's grown up using. She asks if Marvin can. He says he's not much better, and wonders if maybe among the knights, but right then our boy says he'll take a look. The girl curiously asks if he can actually do that. He says he's used to tracking. He picks up a scrap of cloth and starts sniffing it, then activates his detection magic. The moment he opens his eyes, he can see the trail. He tells everyone, it went this way. After following the path for a while, our boy announces that it stopped here, and it looks like it bathed itself. The girl wonders if a magical beast would really clean itself to wash away its own trail. Turan says it probably just felt like bathing. But right at that moment, Turan picks up the trail again, and sees what it's already done. Several knights killed in an instant. And while Turan himself dodges the attack, the other 2 nobles simply use the knights around them as meat shields, then toss them aside like garbage. And in that moment, our boy finally understands. It looks like his mother's words were right all along. A second later, Azella calls for them to attack now, and the remaining knights still standing move in and begin striking at the massive creature. But the monster, realizing it's outnumbered, turns and runs like there's no tomorrow. As it fled and they gave chase, our boy in the back grabbed a handful of rocks, and with his sling he fired them at the monster, shooting past the girl like a rocket, catching her completely off guard. And just like that, the rock punches clean through the monkey's body, dead on impact. When the 2 mages turned around, there was our boy, in an effortlessly cool stance, having already taken down the monster. Right after that, the monster monkey collapses, barely alive, and instantly the girl activates her power, a monstrous flame power, shaped like a serpent made of fire, that detonates the monkey on the spot. Watching it, our boy is genuinely stunned. So that's the lineage power of the pyromancers of House Valtis. At that point, the knights finally declare it's over. Meanwhile, the girl says Turan was incredible, and that she felt a chill run through her for a moment when that rock shot by. The young man beside her asks if she was scared. She just tells him to shut up, because he was the one who screamed like a little girl. He asks in his defense when exactly he did that. On the other side of things, the knights who survived are completely battered and broken. Watching it, our boy just quietly says it's a complete disaster. But he thinks, at least it's a relief they're not dead. Though he knows better than to let it go at that. Yes, there was a surprise attack from a magical beast, but that was a battle they could have come out of without serious injuries. And considering that the body gets stronger in proportion to magical power, these 2 nobles should have several times the physical resilience of ordinary knights. But without a moment's hesitation, they use the weakest people around them as living shields. Right then, Marvin notices Turan staring at him and asks why he's looking at him like that. Our boy says it's nothing, but Azella says more importantly, she invites the guest over to absorb the mana with them. Right after, all 3 begin absorbing the monkey's mana. Our boy recalls recalls something he confirmed in the library, that even when multiple people absorb at the same time, the level of strengthening each person receives doesn't seem to decrease. After a short while, the girl says she can't absorb anymore, that she's hit that damned growth ceiling. Marvin says same. Meanwhile, the girl says she now understands why her father sent him as a guest. Because with that level of magical mastery, and a quantity of mana that rivals her own, and to think he's a noble who hasn't even reached his growth ceiling yet. Then eventually they make their way back. Marvin tells Turan that thinking about it, if it weren't for him they never would have managed to pull this off. From the tracking ability to the shot that brought it down, everything came down to Turan's attacks. Our protagonist says it's not that big a deal, and that if anything he's frustrated he noticed it too late and let it attack first. He didn't know it would have detection abilities either. Marvin asks what he means by detection abilities. Our boy explains that it seems like the abilities that get awakened vary depending on the physical characteristics of the magical beast. The monkey they defeated had large hands and large eyes, but in a form different from what it originally was. So it probably had the ability to hurl things with great force, and the ability to see things at a distance, or see through the forest, would have been awakened too. Marvin says he's genuinely incredible. He never imagined he'd figure something like that out so fast. Our boy says he saw it in the monster bestiary at the Sky Library. Marvin asks what he means, the Sky Library. That place is way too outdated, nobody goes there, while the girl says she went once out of curiosity. But all the books were too difficult, so she left without finishing even half of one. Our boy says that if he ever gets the chance, he could ask the librarian if there are any easier books. But Azella looks confused and asks what he means by librarian. Our boy says yes, the person who manages the Sky Library, and she looks even more confused, asking if someone like that actually exists. Which leaves our boy genuinely puzzled by her reaction. At the end of the day, our boy finally returns to the Sky Library. The little girl welcomes him back, and that's when our boy realizes he was careless. He thinks no knight or commoner would ever call a noble by their first name. In this city, the only proper form of address for a noble is Your Grace. And for someone to be working as a librarian in a place like this, in this condition, that is very, very strange. So he just asks her, how does she know his name? She's caught off guard by his sudden suspicion, but a moment later she smiles and asks if he only just noticed. He says yes, that's right. She tells him she looked at his entry papers and found his name, and that nothing around these library walls escapes her eyes. Curious, Turan asks what he should call her. She simply says she doesn't have a name, so he can call her whatever he wants. How about something cute like, my love? Turan just calls her Miss Librarian. She says he's way too formal, but that he suddenly got very polite all of a sudden, which is pretty strange, and that after spending days bossing her around, telling her to do this and that, he really has changed. Turan says he never did any of that, and asks her not to get too close, it's a bit uncomfortable. But he's still really curious about her, and asks Miss Librarian if she's a mage from the ancient empire. She says no, that she's not even human, that she's something more like a spirit, and asks what he thinks. She explains that when a soul inhabits something living, it's a living spirit. When it inhabits something dead, it's a spirit of the dead. And when it inhabits something that is neither alive nor dead, it's simply a spirit. In other words, the library itself is her. And this appearance is just to make communication easier. And let's just say it's basically a reflection of Mr. Turan's own tastes. She says Mr. Turan's tastes are a little unusual. Our boy nervously tells her not to say things like that. She says it's the truth, because he's basically like a reflection in water. He starts studying her carefully, and then reaches out and touches her, which makes her extremely uncomfortable. She says that's very strange. He just apologizes, but she says irritably that he has no idea how annoying that is, and that she can't use force directly against intruders, because if she could, she'd be punishing everyone who handles the books carelessly. Our boy says it seems like the head of House Valtis didn't know the librarian existed, or rather maybe no one who's ever used this library did. The girl says that's because until now, no one had the qualifications to perceive her, and that her creator apparently set it so that only those who had reached a certain level could recognize her. In other words, only Turan can see her, and she asks if he doesn't find that rather romantic. He asks what she means by that. She says it's the lineage that mages always talk about. Turan, still a little confused, asks if she can tell him something about his lineage, but she says he should be asking his parents about that. He tells her he's an orphan, so she perkily asks if he wants her to check. She just needs him to agree to let her examine his body. Very surprised, he asks what she means by his body, and she just starts laughing, in the most irritating way possible. Then she quickly shoves her hand right into his stomach, which absolutely startles Turan. But then she laughs even more and says now they're connected. Our protagonist tells her not to say such weird things, but he realizes that it didn't actually hurt. She tells him there are a few small things, but that his main lineage is that of a pursuer and a hunter, and she believes that's a characteristic of the Zahar family. Our boy says he understands, but right after that, the librarian's eyes go wide, and she says there's another one, and that it's kind of mixed in. Surprised, Turan asks what she means by mixed. She says it means that he's the result of two people with different lineages. He wants to know which lineage the other one is. She says even she doesn't know, because it's still sealed, and it's not that uncommon for a sealed lineage to emerge when two lineages combine. And simply put, as he gets stronger, it will open on its own. Hearing that, our boy starts thinking about his own mother, and how she was far too educated and refined to have been a simple commoner. So maybe she was descended from some noble family, even if the lineage had diluted to the point where she had no mage-level power at all. Grateful, he bows to her, and says he has a pretty good idea of what he is now. The little girl says if he's that grateful, he should stay at least one more month. And so, after our protagonist discovered the true identity of the library's spirit, Turan stopped just reading on his own. He started asking questions about the books and requesting explanations. Turan asked her if there really are that many invisible substances in the world, and the librarian turned out to know even the knowledge contained in books that had been stolen and vanished from the library over thousands of years. She explained that if he suspends water in the air like this and shapes it this way, he'll be able to see it directly. For Turan, learning the principles of nature explained directly like this was basically a treasure. He discovered that many diseases arise because of invisible microorganisms, and that the decomposition of living things happens because those organisms feed on them. On top of that, he also learned about the refraction of light, the heat generated by friction, and the principles behind how living beings get injured and recover. One day he started testing decomposition, just by touching an apple, and the apple decomposed instantly. She asked excitedly what he thought. Our protagonist said it's fascinating, and that it's not that regular magic can't do this. But just understanding the principle means he uses far less mana, and he realized that simply by changing the way he perceived the world, his magical ability had improved quite a bit. He mentioned that maybe some powerful families are monopolizing this kind of knowledge, because if all mages knew this stuff, they'd lose their advantage. And she says she now understands why the general level of knowledge has been declining over time, and that if it's like Mr. Turan says, it makes perfect sense. Then finally, after a full month, our protagonist says it's time to go. She asks what he means, go? He says the owner of this place has been dropping some pretty clear hints. Hearing that, she starts crying and says she doesn't want him to leave, or at the very least he should take her with him. But our protagonist just sidesteps, making her fall straight to the floor. He asks curiously if she can actually leave. She says no, and asks if he can't just stay here, because she'd definitely take good care of him. Our boy says he'll pass. She pouts and says she doesn't care anyway, and explains that across this continent, there are many legacies left by the gods. He can go take a look at them from time to time, because maybe there's a spirit out there who knows more than she does. Our boy simply walks out and says he'll come back to visit, and she, refusing to even look at him, just says he can come whenever he wants, or not. She doesn't care either way, but he smiles and tells her they still have a lot of books left to read. And so, a few days later, our boy finally sets off. He recalls that according to the full continent map he found inside the Sky Library, the Enril Desert, the Zahar family's home base, lies to the east of Orin. So if he's going to head to Zahar to find clues about his parents and his own lineage, that's the direction he needs to go. So our boy set off on his journey towards Zahar's territory. He figured there was no rush. He could take his time, because if there were clues to be found, they would have vanished in the 18 years he'd already been waiting. But if they're still out there, they're not going to disappear just because he arrives a little late. In the middle of the road though, he came across something very strange. A large red horse standing in front of a young man collapsed on the ground. Our boy wondered if it might be a trap, but then he noticed, it wasn't a monster, it was a horse protecting its owner. In front of the horse stood two very strange men, calling it a cursed demon, and how could a mere pet be that strong? Our boy quickly figures out the attack came from this direction. The one on the left was telling the other to try to find an opening, while the other complained that's easier said than done. And then our boy finally recognizes them. Dark elves. In that instant both dark elves begin summoning their magic. And Turan realizes this is exactly the necromancy of the dark elves he read about in the books. Two monsters made of necromantic magic materialize in front of the horse. Turan wonders if he should step in. It's possible the young man on the ground attacked the dark elves first. But then he notices something. One of the dark elves is eating a human hand. The other asks whose hand it is, and tells him to pass one over. He just says she can have the one from that guy on the ground. Our protagonist is absolutely disgusted. These things are cannibals. He activates his concealment right then and there. Meanwhile, the elf says all they've killed have been men anyway. But before she can say another word, her companion's head is completely destroyed. She freezes in shock, realizing it was an enemy attack, and immediately summons her two beasts. But our boy is already moving faster than she can react. She barely manages to block, then starts screaming at her monsters as they close in. In that moment, the bull monster starts charging in that direction like there's no tomorrow, smashing through everything in its path. She finally realizes realizes it's a concealment magic and declares she wants to see how long he can keep hiding like that. She summons another monster, one that looks like a fox, and it starts tracking him with ease. That energy begins seeping into the bull's body, making it much easier for the dark elf to pinpoint our boy's location. She says she finally found that cursed demon and orders both her monsters to advance and kill him. Right at that moment, our boy closes his fists. When he opens them, a large fireball is sitting in his palm. He launches it at both monsters, but unfortunately it's way too weak, and the bull is already attacking. Our boy realizes it moved too fast. At least he managed to kill one of them, the fox. Except that's not quite how it went. The very fox he thought he'd killed is biting into his leg. He kicks it off and starts running. But the very next second, the bull appears right in front of him, ready to crush him. It launches him with its horns and he slams into a tree. Our boy coughs up blood in agony, and now he's completely surrounded by all three. The dark elf starts gloating. How dare he kill her Kel? He's going to have to beg for death. But to her complete surprise, the red horse drives a hoof straight into her face. Then it starts wailing on her. She screams for her two monsters to help. Now it's not two but three monsters converging on the horse. Furious beyond words, she demands to know how a mere beast dares to humiliate her. She is absolutely going to kill it. But before she can charge at the horse, her head is also destroyed by the bull monster. The moment she dies, all three monsters dissolve. Our boy is completely drained and collapses to the ground, wondering if this might be the end. But right then, the large red horse walks over and starts sniffing at him. Our boy mutters, all right, thanks for that." By nightfall, the blonde young man finally wakes up. Startled, he asks what's happening. But the moment he looks up, he comes face to face with the bull monster still looming nearby. Our boy casually comments that he's finally awake. The confused young man asks who he is. Our protagonist explains he saw him being attacked by dark elves, so he stepped in. The young man's horse walks over to him, and the kid calls out to it by name, Tilly. Our boy remarks that Tilly is pretty smart, even knowing to protect its owner and move to a safer spot. The blonde thanks him for the help and introduces himself as Aziz, of House Burke. Our protagonist introduces himself as Turan and asks if there's some specific reason for a conflict with the Dark Elves. Aziz says there's absolutely no reason. He was on a pilgrimage with his servants when they were attacked out of nowhere, without any provocation. He'd heard other races could be violent, but he never imagined it would be at this level, and he just breaks down crying, completely overwhelmed. After he calms down a little, he apologizes to Turan and says the people he lost this time were incredibly precious to him. Turan asks if they were family. Aziz says they were the knights and servants who traveled with him on the pilgrimage, people who had been with him since he was a child and practically raised him. Hearing that, Turan realizes this is genuinely a good person. He asks how many dark elves attacked them and mentions he killed 2. Aziz thinks that was probably all of them, but not fully trusting that, Turan activates his detection magic and begins scanning the entire area for any dark elves in hiding. Fortunately, he confirms there are none left. Aziz then bows to Turan and asks if he has any urgent plans at the moment. Turan says no, he's also on a kind of pilgrimage. Aziz looks puzzled. With this level of strength, how is he still wandering around on a pilgrimage? And is he really from a great noble family? Then why is he traveling alone? Our boy simply says it's hard to explain, and that he's not actually that strong. He caught one of them by surprise and killed them, but had a really rough time with the second one. He only won because of Tilly's help. At that, our boy activates his power to get a read on Aziz, and Aziz does the same in return. The two finally size each other up. Our boy is surprised. This guy is actually quite strong, and if he hadn't absorbed the Dark Elves' mana, he'd be even weaker right now. On the other hand, Aziz can tell that Turan is genuinely not at the level of facing 2 necromancers, but maybe he has some kind of combat instinct, or a special lineage. Either way, he's honestly puzzled why someone like this is wandering around alone. Even so, he tells Turan that if he doesn't have a set destination, he'd like to invite him to his home in Burke. He'll repay the debt of having his life saved, and for the safe escort back home. Turan asks what exactly this payment would be. Aziz explains that House Burke are vassals of the Great House Arabian in the north, and that they're an enchantment lineage family that has crafted magical artifacts for generations, and they'll craft a magical artifact suited especially for him. And so the next day, Aziz says it looks like everything is finally over. Deep down, he wished he could send them all back to his family's lands, but he knows that's not possible. Still, he turns to Turan and thanks him. Turan, confused, asks for what exactly. Aziz says for not laughing at him, because a noble weeping over the sacrifices of his subordinates must look pretty pathetic. Our boy asks why that would be pathetic at all. Aziz says it's because that's what his father taught him from a young age. Those who fall in righteous battle will reside in the celestial palace with the gods, so grieving for them would be a sign of weakness. A true noble must know how to press forward over those sacrifices. But if strength means not grieving for the loss of people close to you, then he thinks he'll never be strong. Turan tells him that's not weakness, it's kindness. At that, Aziz tells Turan that since they've decided to travel together, how about they drop the formalities from here on out? There doesn't seem to be much of an age gap between them. Our boy says sure, whatever he prefers. The kid lights up immediately and says he's counting on him from now on, calling him friend, which catches Turan a little off guard with that word, but he shakes Aziz's hand and says he's counting on him too. Partway through the journey they stop, and Aziz suggests they rest here for a bit. Then he pulls out a large box. Curious, our protagonist asks what that is. Aziz says it's a cooling container. He loaded it up with food back at the last city. Our boy asks if it's always that cold inside. Aziz says, yep, that's just how it works. Thanks to that, any food stays good for about a week without any issues, and if it gets too cold, you just warm it back up. He also points out a magical item that releases water when you press a button, and another one that builds a shelter if you gather some wood, and yet another that sounds an alarm if anyone approaches. And the clothes he's wearing right now are a magical item with a self-cleaning function. All of this genuinely surprises our boy, because he knows magical items shouldn't be this commonplace. It's actually incredible. He says just that one outfit alone would be more than enough as payment for his life. But Aziz waves it off, saying things like that don't come close to the value of his life. He promises to reward him with something far better once they get back home. But if the elders won't allow it, he'll make one himself. On top of that, Aziz admits he honestly can't even count how many different types of magic he saw during the journey. From animal manipulation, to freezing, levitation, liquid control, physical enhancement, light emission, restraint, instant death, terrain manipulation, and even lightning strikes. He asks if Turan spent his entire life just practicing magic, or if he has some kind of lineage ability that lets him learn any type of magic on the spot. Our protagonist pauses for a moment, and tells Aziz that they agreed he wouldn't investigate which family he comes from. Aziz, a little embarrassed, says it was just a joke, and that a lineage ability like that couldn't possibly exist anyway. It would be way too absurd. But seriously, how old is he? Because his face doesn't look like someone who's even hit 30 yet. To Aziz's complete shock, Turan says he's about half a month away from turning 19, while Aziz tells him he's turning 43 this year, leaving our protagonist stunned. But Aziz shrugs it off, saying, well, a 24-year difference isn't really that significant for their kind. But honestly, he should have caught on sooner when Turan said he defeated 2 necromancers with that amount of magical power. Who would have thought 2 geniuses like this could exist in the world? Turan, curious, asks what he means by 2. Aziz says exactly that. She might not be quite at his level, or maybe she is, it's hard to say with her lineage being what it is. But in any case, he knows another genius the same age as him, and she's his second cousin. Our boy asks if he could request that person to craft a magical item for him, but Aziz says no, she's not from a branch family, she's from the main house. Our boy asks if she's really from the main house. Aziz confirms it. She's the princess of House Arabian, and she may well become the head of the great lineage in the future. And unlike an ordinary mage family, the position of leader of a great lineage isn't something that just gets passed to your biological child. Because in a great lineage, there are dozens of relatives within the same generation, and among them, someone stronger than the patriarch's child almost always ends up emerging. Even so, among the patriarch's children, she was born, Misa, possessing the greatest magical talent of all of them. In just 10 years after awakening to her magical power, Misa had mastered Arabian's lineage magic and all forms of combat magic. As a result, having received every kind of support available, even at just 20 years old, the sheer volume of her magical power isn't far off from the main family's senior members. Our boy asks whether, with that much magical power at that age, her family must have given her some kind of special backing for the future. Aziz confirms that's exactly right. She even inherited the magical power of her great-uncle when he passed. Though, of course, they all got a portion too. Hearing all this, Turan thinks to himself there's definitely a very good reason why the great lineages sit at the top. But then Aziz announces that it looks like they've arrived. Our boy is genuinely taken aback by what he sees. Aziz tells him this is the Deccan Plain, the central territory of Arabian. After walking a little further, they finally arrive at House Burke's estate, a place called Zabalin, a massive, sprawling mansion. At the mansion's entrance, Aziz's mother rushes out to her son and asks what happened. The kid just throws his arms around her, clearly shaken, and starts telling her everything. Meanwhile, our boy lingers at the back, still wondering if this guy is really 43 years old. Right then, Aziz's father also appears and tells him to have a little dignity. At the very least, he should be calling her mother with some composure. Aziz nervously apologizes, but then he introduces his parents to our boy, Turan, a new friend he made in the south, the man who risked his life to save him when he was on the brink of death. If not for this friend, he never would have made it home. His mother, worried, says the pilgrimage route shouldn't have been that dangerous. She asks what exactly happened. He tells her they were attacked by necromancers, dark elves. His mother's expression shifts immediately. She absolutely explodes, screaming that it was dark elves, those filthy, wretched creatures who dared lay a hand on her son. She says if she doesn't personally lead an army to tear them apart, she is not going to calm down, but her husband beside her tells her to settle down for now, because people are watching. Then he approaches Turan and asks if he might know which family his benefactor belongs to. Our protagonist says it's hard to say. Aziz's father asks what he means by hard. Our boy says honestly the most accurate answer is that he doesn't really know. He was born to a commoner mother and doesn't know who his father is. Aziz looks genuinely surprised, saying he never told him that. Our protagonist says it's not exactly a story he's proud of. Aziz's mother says she understands, so his name is Turan, and he doesn't know what family he belongs to. But since he saved the child who is the treasure of their house, as the matriarch of House Burke, she will pay the reward he deserves. However, offering him a room in the mansion would be difficult, so she'll make arrangements for him to stay at the finest inn in the city instead of the main estate. Hearing that, Aziz looks at his friend in disbelief and asks what she's saying. How can she not receive in her own home the man who saved his life? But his mother says that under normal circumstances it would be fine. However, there is currently an important guest staying at their estate, and as much as he is their benefactor, allowing in a guest of unknown identity is difficult. She asks Turan to please understand. But right then, someone is walking down the staircase, saying that on her account, her aunt doesn't need to do any of that, because she doesn't believe someone who saved Aziz would suddenly try to assassinate her. A girl who looks extremely frail, dressed entirely in black, appears before them. Aziz immediately recognizes her. It's Misa, his second cousin. He asks curiously what she's doing here. And at the back, our boy realizes, so that's the woman, the princess of House Arabian, but she looks more like a walking corpse than a princess. Misa says it hasn't been that long since the last time, and that she nearly got assassinated by those vermin from Zahar, so she essentially came here to hide. Aziz asks if she really experienced an assassination attempt at the main estate. With their security systems as tight as they are, how would that even be possible? Misa cuts him off and says yes, exactly. There's probably a traitor inside, and it's not like there are only 1 or 2 people in the family who don't like her. So she tells everyone she's tired and is going to retire first. She wishes them all a good night. And that's how Turan ended up spending the night at Aziz's house. When he woke up the next day, he was in an incredibly luxurious room. After getting dressed and ready, he started walking the mansion's hallways. And around a corner, Aziz appeared, asking what he was doing wandering the corridors alone. Our boy, curious, asks what that thing is. Aziz says it's a magic lamp they made themselves. But while they were talking, a massive thunderclap struck outside, startling our boy quite a bit. He asked what that was. Aziz says it looks like Mesa is training her magic again. She's always been incredibly dedicated. Turan asks if that's the lineage magic of House Arabian. Aziz confirms it. It's called the Storm lineage. And he admits he's never resented his own bloodline. But that right there gives him a serious case of envy. It honestly looks like a real god. Watching it, Turan thinks he's genuinely curious just how strong the next generation's heir of Arabian will turn out to be. Aziz, standing beside him, asks if he wants to go see. Turan says he's curious, but figures it probably wouldn't be great to intrude. He's still a stranger in their home. But Aziz waves that off. It's not like he's some kind of assassin. He says honestly, a few years back he trained with Mesa, and that moment has been stuck in his throat ever since. He wants to see her at least get frustrated for once when she faces him. So he wants Turan to spar with her. The two of them head over to where Mesa is training. When she turns around, she recognizes her cousin and asks what he's doing here, then asks about the other one. Our protagonist introduces himself as Turan. She says yes, right, Turan, that was the name. She asks what they're doing there. Aziz says it's nothing big, they just saw her training magic and wanted to join. He asks if she remembers when they trained together a while back. Mesa says she remembers. That time he spent a full week trying to pull it off, while she managed it in 2 attempts, and then he ran off crying. At that, Aziz spins around to glare at Turan, realizing he was laughing. But awkwardly he says, well, this friend of his, Turan, is easily one of the most talented mages he's ever seen. He's absurdly talented and without a doubt a complete monster. So how about the two of them spar? Mesa asks what he means, spar. At that moment she turns her gaze to Turan and begins to release her power. Our boy looks up at the sky and realizes just how overwhelming she is with those lightning strikes. Then she releases a massive surge of power toward Turan, and our boy starts trembling, thinking to himself that she is absolutely terrifying. Mesa simply looks at him and apologizes in advance for saying this, but he doesn't appear to be at a level where fighting her would even make sense, which leaves our boy looking very serious about that assessment. But Aziz cuts her off right there and says that in terms of raw magical power, of course he wouldn't be a match for her. What's truly incredible about this guy is his speed of learning magic. It's unlike anything he's seen. Turan is a magical genius the likes of which he's never encountered in his entire life. And even she, Mesa, probably doesn't reach that level. She remarks that since he's going this far to praise him, she wants to see what he's actually capable of. Our protagonist suggests they each show each other a magic the other probably doesn't know. Whoever pulls it off faster wins. Aziz says that's a solid method and asks what she thinks. She just says fine. She did hear that Mr. Turan doesn't even know what his own lineage magic is, so it wouldn't be fair for her to use her innate magic. They'll leave that off the table, and she says she's going first. In that moment, with a single step, vines spread out and wrap around all of them. Then they grab hold of Aziz and fling him into the air, leaving him completely panicked. She says this is plant creation and manipulation magic. She asks if maybe he could replicate this. Up in the air, Aziz just tells her to put him down. She tells him to hang tight for a second because it's fun. Watching Aziz dangling up there, our boy simply crouches down and touches the ground. And he thinks, fire creation magic is just a manifestation of the phenomenon of burning. Water creation magic is just the act of drawing out invisible moisture from the air. So for these vines, it must be the same principle. He simply says, grow, thinking that it's a matter of making the seeds already planted in the soil grow rapidly. In other words, it's not creation, it's growth. And just like that, one of the vines starts growing up his arm, which shocks even Mesa, and obviously Aziz too. She says the fact that he told it to grow suggests he figured out the true nature of this magic immediately. She asks if he's seen this somewhere before. Our protagonist says it's his first time. She says a little irritably that it seems like what Aziz said about him was right, which is pretty rare. So now it's his turn to set a challenge, and she wants to see just how capable he is. Our boy starts thinking about a magic she probably doesn't know. He knows using Zahar's lineage magic would be a clear act of suicide, so he eventually settles on something else. He extends his hand, a small mouse starts crawling out from the grass. Mesa says it's just animal control and asks if that's all, but Turan tells her this little guy is just an ingredient. He locks eyes with the rat, and a magic begins to absorb the rat's body, completely disintegrating it, which leaves Mesa stunned. Our boy says that's the magic. She very seriously says then it's her turn. She uses the same animal control magic and grabs another rat. Once she has it, she begins trying to make it decompose, but she simply can't do it. She's genuinely baffled, wondering how he pulled that off, and that's definitely not ordinary magic. Aziz says why is she even using magic like that, it's disgusting. Turan says it was just the first thing that came to mind, so he went with it. But he starts wondering to himself, was he right to suspect this? Even the great House Arabian doesn't have a solid grasp on this. Aziz says it looks like it's not working. He asks Mesa if they can just give Turan the win. She absolutely snaps at him to shut his mouth. How dare he think she can't do this? Now it's said that when it comes to using magic, causality is an extremely complex factor. Whether the phenomenon you intend to cause is something natural, whether the user clearly understands the cause behind the magical phenomenon, whether the amount of mana consumed is appropriate to bring about that phenomenon. Among those, the ability to perceive the cause of the phenomenon is a critically important factor, one that simultaneously affects both the success rate of the magic and the mana consumption. And one way to compensate for a lack of causality when using magic is essentially to pour in a massive amount of mana, filling the inefficiency with brute volume. Inside Mesa's mind, she simply commands it to rot while still alive, and begins pouring in mana, an enormous, relentless amount. And finally, it actually works. Aziz is stunned, while our boy in the back already knows exactly what she did. Completely drained, Mesa says she managed to do it in the end. But right after, she collapses to the ground. Alarmed, Aziz asks what's happening, and tells her to open her eyes. Our boy wonders what the cause could be, whether she really burned through too much mana. But he knows people don't normally faint just from exhausting their mana. At most, it should cause severe exhaustion, since they've lost even the energy needed to keep their body upright. But looking at her closely, he thinks he finally understands. He catches hold of Mesa and asks Aziz if there isn't a mage with a healing lineage anywhere nearby. Aziz says no. Turan calls for someone to bring water and salt to this young lady's room, along with her items. Carrying Mesa, our boy notices she is so light that he almost doesn't know if he's holding a person or a newborn lamb. And even the mana she was using could barely keep her body sustained, a body that frankly shouldn't have even been capable of standing up in the first place. Shortly after, Aziz brings her to her room, where she finally wakes up. Aziz's mother, worried, asks if she's alright and if she's conscious. Mesa looks surprised and asks why she's there. Her aunt says Aziz told her she collapsed suddenly while training magic with a guest, and asks if that's true. Mesa just goes quiet and tense. Her aunt asks if that man did something to her, and says for now they'll keep an eye on the situation. But Mesa says no, it wasn't his fault. It was just a small mistake on her part, nothing more. She asks that everyone please leave, because her head is throbbing. Her aunt tells her she made a little soup for her to eat, and that she knows Mesa doesn't eat because of the magic. But she needs to think about her health too. She'll leave it here for now, and she should at least try to eat a little. After her aunt leaves, Mesa exhales in relief. She stares at the soup, she picks it up and brings it toward her mouth. And the moment it touches her lips, something happens in her body and mind. She begins to see a woman and a child, begging her to please save them, saying that if it's her, she can do it. While the child says it hurts so much for her sister. Terrified by these memories, she drops the soup with a jolt, and then she begins to completely unravel. But while all of that was happening, elsewhere, in the basement of House Burke, in the temple of the goddess Manga, our boy is having a conversation with a knight. He comments that both the doors and the walls are extremely solid, with only a single gap, like muscles forged over centuries. While the knight just tells him to give up on any idea of getting out. This man is Haram Burke. Our boy simply says he understands. He was already thinking the same thing. The knight says it was impressively solid. Our boy agrees. The old man walks closer and begins observing the knight's movements. Curious, he asks what he was doing. The man says just training. Watching it, our boy notices that every single movement was the absolute minimum preparation needed to apply the next force. He wonders if this is what peak efficiency in a trained body looks like. The knight approaches and asks him what he saw in the movement of his sword just now. Our boy asks what he means, but sensing the man is completely serious, he says he thought it was incredible. The knight nods, and comments that most nobles consider martial arts insignificant, because it's so much easier to attack from a distance with magic. And it all comes down to the fact that their physical bodies are too weak, and because their minds can't master their bodies, they rely on cheap tricks. Our boy says that unless it's a lineage lineage specialized in physical combat, like the Hercules lineage, focusing on magical power ends up being far more efficient. But as you go through trials, situations arise where you have no choice but to face them head-on, even when you'd rather avoid it. The knight simply goes to the wall, grabs a sword, and tells him to hold it. Our boy points out that he was locked up here precisely because they thought he was suspicious, and now out of nowhere he's handing him a weapon. But the knight says it doesn't matter, because it's just a piece of iron. What makes it a sword is the body of whoever holds it, and with his weak body right now, he cannot cut with it. Hearing that, our boy thinks about what he could actually do with this sword, so he asks the man to watch carefully. And then he begins channeling mana directly into the sword itself, creating a kind of magical blade. The knight immediately tells Turan that's not how you do it. He tells him not to involve mana in this at all. He starts correcting his stance, more weight on the front leg, like the earth itself is holding his feet in place. And he begins explaining all kinds of things to Turan, like how to properly grip a sword and so on. Our boy just listens to all of it. Then he tells him to repeat it 10 times without stopping to breathe. Watching him go through the repetitions, the knight remarks that he is genuinely a good vessel, and that if he can, he should set aside time to wring every last drop out of his body. He says mana is nothing more than a crutch. Mages assume their physical capabilities are solid, but that's just the bare minimum their bodies are capable of. A properly trained body can tear across a battlefield without needing mana at all, so he needs to understand that difference. Our boy says he'll carve that into his mind. But right at that moment, the door opens. Our boy looks over. It's Aziz's mother. She immediately says she was rude to Mr. Turan, and that she did something you simply don't do to your own benefactor, so she asks for his forgiveness. Our protagonist says it looks like the young lady is doing well, and that if anyone should be apologizing, it's him. His conduct as a guest was inappropriate. But she says that Misa expressed she'd like to apologize to Mr. Turan personally. She asks if he has a moment right now. Shortly after, Misa appears in the hallway of the mansion and says it's been a nuisance. She heard he was locked away in the temple because of her, and apologizes for the unnecessary trouble she caused. Our protagonist says it was the right call, and more importantly, he's glad she's alright. She looks at him and brings up the magic from yesterday, the one that made the animal decompose. She asks if that isn't an unknown lineage magic, and that the mana consumption was absurd. She asks if he was trying to fool people. Our protagonist says no, that's not it, and that if she understands the principle, she can definitely use it too. She says then he's not going to teach her for free. Is that it? But if he won't teach her the method, that doesn't prove it isn't lineage magic either. Our protagonist says as far as winning or losing goes, it doesn't really matter either way to him. She gets very annoyed and asks what he means by that. How is she supposed to just leave it like that? She says fine, let's do this differently then. If he tells her the secret behind that magic, she'll teach him a secret technique from House Arabian in exchange. Our boy says that's perfect then. The two of them simply start talking. After a while she finally gets it, and says so at its core, it's a biological enhancement magic. And he used invisible microorganisms. He confirms that's right. Misa says that's what she thought. She was pouring in far too much mana without realizing it. That's why the efficiency was so terrible. Honestly irritating. And in the end she did lose, because even though she managed to pull it off, it was entirely through sheer brute force. Turan says he'll take the bet into consideration, but she says that doesn't count, and that normally when evaluating magical skill, the absurd volume of mana dumped into it isn't part of the equation. She asks if he could call it a draw, at least for Aziz's sake, because she doesn't want to see his face being smug about it. Our protagonist says fine, he can do that. Misa walks to her dresser and says now she needs to pay up. She picks up a comb and says this looks like a good one, and begins combing her hair. She explains that as he can see, when objects rub against each other like this, a phenomenon occurs where they attract each other. That's where our boy cuts her off immediately, and says static electricity, which completely surprises her. She asks how he knew that, and says that in and of itself, that's one of the world's deepest secret knowledges. But fine, she'll think of something better to pay him with, since she needs to find something he doesn't already know. So she says until she comes up with adequate compensation, how about they keep training together, and that this is purely to pay off the debt, not because she needs him. On his end, Turan is genuinely excited and says that's great. They can meet every afternoon in the garden. Later at dinner, the head of the family says there's not much, but he can eat plenty. Not much? Are you serious? There's an incredible spread here. Aziz asks why it's so extravagant. This is way more than even their own birthdays. Someone looking in would think the head of House Arabian himself had come to visit. His mother just tells him to keep quiet. Our protagonist thinks to himself, yeah, this is definitely not an ordinary meal. At that, Aziz's mother says, picking up from a previous conversation, that she heard her son made a promise to give him a powerful magical artifact as payment for his life. Our boy confirms that's right. She asks if there's something specific he has in mind. Our boy says he wants something that helps with defense. It's easy to hurt others with magic, but protecting yourself is the hard part. So if possible, something that helps against surprise attacks. Aziz's mother says that's something they do quite a bit of, so it won't be difficult, but they don't have anything ready at the moment. Aziz asks if he can make it, but his mother tells him that if he doesn't want to bring Hausberg crashing down, he should step back. The kid at the front of the table immediately pipes up and says he'll make it himself, because as it happens, he just finished a commission from the main house recently, so he has plenty of free time. His mother asks how he plans to approach it. He says that for something meant to defend against surprise attacks, the best option is something you always have on you, like a ring, an earring, a necklace, with the function of instantly releasing the guardian lineage defense the moment you inject mana. His mother says that's not bad at all. She asks what the timeline is. He says 1 month. She says nothing is more embarrassing than parents bragging about their children, but this kid already has skills that don't fall behind hers as head of the family. The patriarch adds that in practical terms, this means an artifact crafted by a mage at the level of the enchantment lineage head, with a full month dedicated exclusively to that artifact. Our boy says he's grateful but asks if it's not a bit excessive. Aziz's mother says it is excessive, but that wouldn't mean her son's life is worth very little, and since they can do it, it's fine. And for the entire month he can stay as their guest. She asks him please not to feel uncomfortable and to make himself at home. The next day, our boy starts walking through the city alongside his friend Aziz. Aziz says he thinks his mother took an interest in him. He actually told her more about him before going to sleep, from the fact that his magical talent doesn't fall behind Mesa's, to the fact that he never skips training. His original intent was to stop his mother from looking down on him as a rootless wandering noble without backing. Our boy says looking at all of this now, it seems like she wants to recruit him into the family. Aziz says that's exactly it. They shower you with benefits, then apply pressure, and try to reel you in by introducing you to a beautiful young woman. And apparently quite a few adults in the family got pulled in that way. Our boy says this is all pretty complicated, but Aziz tells him not to worry too much. The artifact is just something nice meant to win his goodwill, and she's not going to force him into marriage just because he accepted it. His mother isn't that classless. But then he asks whether he has anything going on right now. Our boy says he has a commitment to train with Miss Mesa in the afternoon. Hearing that there's still plenty of time before then, Aziz says they can go patrol the city together. Zabalin isn't the capital, but there's still plenty to enjoy, and he can't spend the whole day just training magic in his room. Our boy says he was actually planning exactly that, but Aziz tells his friend that life is too short not to enjoy it, and he just starts dragging him through the city. They even end up in a casino, and later a bar, though our boy keeps turning things down. But as they were walking through the city, our boy spotted a wanted poster. He stared at that photo and wondered, could that be Kiorn? But no, it can't be. There's no way that's Kiorn. Then later the two of them head to a theater. Inside, Aziz tells him the story set around the year 219.5, when the warriors of Arabian departed for the Demon Desert. There was a knight named Kiorn, and with divine assistance, Kiorn defeated the enemy after a grueling battle. The two of them were completely caught up watching the performance. Aziz asks if it was worth seeing. Our boy says yes, it was really good, while thinking to himself that back then Kiorn had told him he was just an ordinary knight. But seeing this now, it looks like he had an absolutely absurd level of ability, and if he ever runs into Kiorn again someday, he's going to ask him if this story is actually true. But the next morning when our boy finally wakes up, he finds that knight staring straight back at him. The knight asks if he gave his body a proper rest. Our protagonist says yes. But what brings him here? He says yesterday he saw that his vessel looks quite promising, so he's going to train him. He asks if he's up for it. Our protagonist says yeah, let's go, and thinks to himself that this is going to be far more rewarding than spending the whole day goofing around. But right at that moment, Aziz pops into Turan's room saying he came to tell him there's an incredible play today. Then he sees his uncle standing right there in front of Turan. His uncle says he was on his way to train, and that he should also be forging that weak body of his. He asks if he wants to come along. Aziz immediately says no, says he just got back and is exhausted, and then sprints back to his own room. Our boy stands there in surprise, wondering what that was about. But little did he know that hours later, he himself would be completely destroyed. And it finally hit him. That reaction wasn't for nothing, because this man is an absolute monster when it comes to training. After the final exercise wraps up, Haram Burke says that's enough for today, while our boy is completely wrecked. The knight asks if he's tired. Turan very quickly says yes. But the knight says that even so, as a mage, he should consider himself lucky, that he only has to do this once. Our boy says if he weren't a mage, it would be different. The knight says yes, of course it would be. An ordinary body, even after it's been forged, weakens with time, and you have to constantly put it through trials to maintain it. But for mages, thanks to mana, they can keep a body in its ideal state. So once he tempers his into steel, it won't weaken anymore. But he says that's enough talking, because he's already rested long enough. Our boy asks what he means by rested enough. Isn't this already done? The knight says of course not. Today's training is the body, not the mind. He's rested plenty. Now he's going to teach him weapons techniques and hand-to-hand combat. And so it turned into a full day of suffering for Turan. It's said that the routine at House Burke was extremely intense. The combat training with Aziz's uncle, Haram Burke, who told him this is a special space where where the body feels several times heavier than normal. And if he slips up for even an instant, he will be crushed flat into the ground. That was essentially his mornings, training his body relentlessly. By evening, he would return to the mansion and repeat the magical training sessions with Mesa. And before he knew it, 3 weeks had already gone by. During one training session with Mesa, he realizes he missed the target again. Mesa says that for someone like him to be struggling with this, it must really be challenging. Our boy says obviously. He's not from Arabian. She says in that case it's hard to help, because she's never had to aim lightning magic in this particular way. She asks if it's not just a matter of firing and hitting. Our boy says it's harder than it sounds. But right at that moment, a messenger arrives heading toward Miss Mesa. He asks her who this man is. She says it's none of his business, and more importantly what happened, and says that no one from the main house was supposed to approach her while she was recovering. The messenger says the head of the family has summoned the young lady. She asks what happened, and says he'd better answer fast. If it's not important, he'll regret it. He says they've received word that the Dark Elves have launched a major offensive in the south. 3 cities have already fallen. They're organizing an expedition. In that moment, Turan's thoughts turn to the Dark Elves. Those murderous cannibals. Looks like they've shown up again. Mesa says she understands and tells them to let the others know she'll be back shortly. Then she turns to Turan and says fortunately, it looks like she has to leave. And speaking of which, she should collect the price for that disgusting decomposition magic. So she asks Turan whether he happens to know that electricity also flows through the human body. He looks completely confused and asks what she means, electricity. She says it seems he doesn't know, and honestly, there's no way he would, because this is one of House Arabian's secrets. So she'll consider the debt paid if she teaches him this properly, and it will definitely be of great help. Our boy says it might be. She explains that when a person sees or feels something, that part of the body sends a tiny electrical signal to the brain. If through the eyes, from the eyes to the brain. If through smell, from the nose to the brain. In that moment, our boy begins thinking about that tiny current flowing through the body. He thinks about how this electricity flows throughout the entire body, and if he accelerates the electrical signals transmitted along that path, he simply opens his eyes, and an electrical shock surges through them, and everything goes kind of numb and still. That's when he hears Mesa's voice in slow motion, asking, well, how about that? Our boy is absolutely thrilled, but asks what the hell is actually happening right now. A moment later, his whole body starts trembling in pain. After he returns to normal, Mesa says it looks like he managed it, and that this happened because he pushed the mana in recklessly, and that it'll probably be hard to adjust at first because of the headaches. But once he gets used to it, he'll be able to sustain it for quite a long time. Our protagonist says the more he thinks about it, this feels like something way too valuable compared to what he gave her. But she just takes a big leap into the air and says it's just an investment. Because he seems to have some talent, and if he ends up learning even more incredible magic in the future, she'll collect everything back, plus what he already owes her. After she says that, she takes off into the sky. Our boy just watches her go. Meanwhile, in the city of Morgan, at the center of the Dakin plain, the entire population is buzzing with excitement over the arrival of House Arabian. Aziz, watching it all, says they're just humans heading out to hunt dark elves. But this looks more like a victory parade. And just look at how excited everyone is. In that moment, he spots his cousin and starts calling out to her. But his father grabs his arm and tells him to hold himself together for a moment. Have at least a little noble composure. Right then, to everyone's surprise, a herald cries out that the head of the family is entering. Amid the knights, our boy begins to observe this person and realizes, so this is the current head of House Arabian, an old man who carries a very somber air, but he knows this man is incredibly powerful. His name is Badal Arabian. Our protagonist walks over to Aziz and remarks that the head of the family's complexion doesn't look great. He's extremely pale. His health might not be in the best shape. Aziz says he's heard rumors that he suffered a severe injury in a battle against the head of House Sahar long ago. But since that was a very long time ago, it might just be due to advanced age at this point. But right then, to the entire crowd's astonishment, the head of the house raises his hand. Massive black clouds begin forming around everyone, and then enormous bolts of lightning strike down across the entire area. The commoners erupt in excitement, crying out, "Long live House Arabian, the Lord of Thunder protects his descendants." Watching all of it from the side, our boy thinks, so this is the power of Arabian. Even with a body in poor condition, he effortlessly covers the entire land below. This is the pinnacle of magic achieved by a human being. And our boy thinks to himself, one day he'll be able to do this too. Then elsewhere, Aziz's brother hands him his magical artifact, and says that just wearing it already raises his physical resistance slightly, and if he injects mana into it, that level rises even further. At its peak, it approaches the level of nobles from the Guardian lineage. But the mana consumption is quite high, so it's better not to maintain it for too long. Our boy says this is without a doubt an incredible treasure, and that an object like this probably wouldn't be common even among great families. It's an exceptionally well-crafted item. But then Aziz's mother walks over to Turan's side and asks if he might have any interest in formally joining their family. Our boy says it's a proposal he's genuinely grateful for, but he thinks it would be difficult. Aziz's mother says she understands. She's heard the stories through Aziz, that he's someone with a great deal to accomplish, and that he'll have trouble staying in any one place. And she says he can consider this just the sentimental attachment of an old woman. woman. Our boy simply bows to her and says he will never forget the hospitality she showed him, and that Aziz and House Burke will be his friends forever. She says yes, that's enough. Shortly after our boy sets off to leave, he notices two people waiting for him. Aziz's uncle, Haram Burke, hands him a kind of weapon and says it's a magical device. Nothing fancy in terms of functions, but it's durable, and the blade is very sharp. Our boy, clearly moved, thanks him and calls him master, which definitely surprises Haram Burke, but he's obviously very pleased by it. After Turan leaves, Aziz goes and drapes a cloak over our boy's shoulders. Our protagonist asks what this is, and his friend asks if he wasn't a little envious of his clothes before, that they don't get dirty easily, and they also repair themselves if they're lightly torn. He also has a shirt and a pair of pants to go with it. Our boy is genuinely moved by his friend's generosity, while Aziz says he's a great friend too, not just for saving his life, but because spending time together and seeing how he lives has given him a lot to think about. A curious Aziz then asks where he's planning to head. Our boy says east first. Aziz says then it's Carmine, and that he's actually been there too. He warns him that if he can avoid it, he shouldn't take a ship. The waves are absolutely brutal. Even the wine cups end up dancing. But in Turan's mind, he knows he'll have to brave those waves to reach Zahar's territory, the Enril Desert. But he obviously can't say that. Aziz says, well, someone as stubborn as him isn't going to starve to death anywhere, and that he should come back safe and pay him back for this cloak. Our boy says yes, he'll definitely be back. And so that same day, our protagonist set out on his journey once more. He thinks to himself, alone again. But now it's completely different. He wants to take a gentle stroll, and then he simply starts running through everything at a speed the people around him don't even register. He passes through city after city, until he finally stops at the edge of a forest. In that moment, he catches a strange smell. He notices it's the smell of something burning, but something far more nauseating than the smell of an animal on fire. Finally, after a little while, he arrives at the source and finds a village completely burned to the ground. Even the people were burned alive. Turan wonders if they suffered a bandit attack, because he doesn't think the Dark Elves would have come this far. But right then he notices a strange movement inside one of the houses. He makes his way over. When he finally opens the door, he's startled to find himself face to face with a girl who had been locked in the attic hiding. Terrified, she starts screaming. But our protagonist slowly descends and asks her to calm down. He's not an enemy, he only came to help. She nervously asks if that's true, and our boy says yes. He asks if she can tell him what happened. She says very nervously that he killed everyone. That mage. Our protagonist asks what she means, a mage, but the girl just collapses to the floor without strength. Afterward, Turan picks her up and examines her. He thinks fortunately it's nothing serious. She's probably just exhausted from being trapped in that attic for so long. After stepping outside, he thinks his first priority is getting the child somewhere safe. But the moment our boy steps out of the house, there are multiple people staring at him, and a woman with an arrow aimed straight at his head, shouting that she found him. She orders him to get on his knees. You murdering bastard, he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. She stares him down and asks if it wasn't enough to commit a massacre like this. And on top of that, he's trying to kidnap a small child. Right beside her, her companion, absolutely furious, tells him not to move, because if he dares, he dies. But our boy calmly says this is a misunderstanding and asks them to wait. The companion moves to attack anyway, and Vissen unleashes on him, calling him an idiot. There was a child right there and he could have killed her. He says nervously it was an accident, he didn't mean it. But to everyone's shock, our boy had stopped the strike effortlessly, still shielding the little girl. He glances down at his bracelet, thinking he didn't expect to have to use it this soon. The group is completely thrown off by that power, realizing he didn't even get a single burn mark. On the other side, the little girl asks if he just blocked that magic with his bare body. And apparently their leader is wondering what kind of defensive magic that even is, and whether it might be some kind of lineage ability. But cutting through those thoughts, Turan says it wasn't him who attacked this village, and he'll say it again, this is just a misunderstanding. But if they dare attack him again, he won't just be defending himself this time. Vissen very seriously looks at the little girl in Turan's arms. After thinking for a moment, she calms herself and says it makes sense. There would be no reason for someone to cause a tragedy like this, and then stick around just to save a child. She introduces herself as Vissen and asks his name. Our protagonist says Turan. Still serious, she says that even though the circumstantial evidence says otherwise, how are they supposed to believe him? Our boy says she can simply ask the girl once she wakes up. It sounds like she saw the real culprit. Vissen, stunned, asks if she really saw the arsonist. Our protagonist asks what she means by arsonist. She asks if he seriously doesn't know who that is. Our boy says he genuinely doesn't. She explains very seriously that this is a deranged mage who's committed these atrocities. For the past several months, he's been periodically attacking isolated villages, tying up and burning the residents alive. And since no survivors are ever left, not even his gender is known. All they know about this person is what people call him, the arsonist. Then later on, the little girl finally wakes up, and she says, well, he wore a red cloak and had a beard on his face. He looked terrifying, like a lumberjack. The moment the group hears that, they all turn back to Turan, and realize he looks nothing like that description. Visin turns to him looking embarrassed, and says she's sorry. They were rude because of her impatience, and it was clearly a mistake on her part to point her weapon at him. Her companion says he's sorry too. Meanwhile, our boy thinks to himself that even among nobles there are those who let their sense of duty override reason, and he finds himself thinking once more of that honest and good-hearted leader. Our boy then says that what matters is she put the child's well-being first, then asks if they came here specifically to capture the arsonist. Visin says that's right, and that when there happened to be someone on the scene of a fire, she thought they'd finally caught the real culprit this time. But things ended up like this. But now that they have an accurate description of the culprit, they'll be able to catch him soon, because they have a tracker among them. Surprised, our boy asks what she means by tracker, and whether she might be from House Sahar. But then why would one of them be in a place like this? The girl quickly says no, that's not it. Her name is Asha, from House Carmain. She came from Aviaka, and these are her friends from vassal families. And Asha here is descended from someone in the age of ancestors who mixed their blood with the noble House Sahar. That lineage manifested weakly in her, so she's skilled at tracking magic but has no talent for concealment. Her family used to call it a primitive lineage. But more importantly, she has a request for Mr. Turan. She asks if he might be able to help them hunt the arsonist. They'll give him a reward for the capture, or she could even share some of her mana with him. Either way, what she needs is to earn merit. Our boy asks if the arsonist's power level is known. She says from what she knows, he's a noble level mage, and among the villages he attacked, some were protected by knights. Even so, all of them were killed. Our boy thinks to himself, he killed multiple knights. Maybe this is exactly the kind of opponent he needs right now, because the weak demonic beasts along the roadside aren't increasing his strength anymore. So he tells her all right, which clearly makes her very happy. But he says first, they need to get the child somewhere safe. Then later, back at another village, they track down a kind old man and hand the little girl over to him, and give him enough money to take good care of her until she grows up. Our boy stares down that old man very seriously, and says he'll be back in a few years to check on her, so he had better take very good care of her, which leaves the old man noticeably nervous. Right after that, they return to the scene of the crime. Asha activates her power. The moment she opens her eyes, she starts reading the enemy's trail. She tells everyone they still need to look a bit further. Visin asks which direction they should go. Asha says it's this way. And so everyone follows Asha as she leads the way, moving like a hunting dog sniffing out a scent. Our boy, curious, asks exactly how she tracks someone like this. Asha says first she looks for footprints belonging to a human man, and once she reaches the main road, she follows the scent of ash. If he didn't change his clothes, there should be ash residue on them. Our boy thinks to himself she's a real professional, and that before, they didn't even know the suspect's gender, which is probably exactly why they couldn't find him. But finally, after a while, Asha says she found him, and she just starts running forward, which worries Visin. She calls after her that it's dangerous. But after a short walk, they arrive at an isolated cave in the middle of a mountain. Visin tells Turan to take the lead, and the rest will stay back. She activates a ball of light and begins illuminating the path, but after a moment she turns to Asha and asks if there's someone in there. Asha says yes, one person, and she can sense them. They finally reach the back of the cave. Several lights are burning inside, and sitting at the center is a very strange old man, looking like he's barely clinging to life, asking what brings such visitors to such a remote place. Our boy calmly asks if he's the arsonist. Meanwhile, Asha, behind him, says she smells something strange coming from this man. Visin immediately draws her bow and aims at him, saying it must be him, but she's going to confirm it first. She asks if he's the murderer who kidnapped and burned the residents of the nearby villages. The old man says he has no idea what she's talking about, but then he quickly extends his hand and wraps everything in an explosion magic, trying to kill them all at once. Obviously caught off guard, those three are hurled backwards. But our boy activates his barrier, shielding both himself and Visin from serious injury. Seeing this, the old man thinks he's in trouble. They're actually strong. But without a second thought, Visin fires an arrow that drives straight into the old man's leg. He drops to the ground, wounded. He immediately presses his hand to the rock, and multiple stone hands burst up and come at both of them. Our boy identifies it as earth manipulation magic. But he wonders, wasn't this man supposed to be from a flame lineage? How is he doing this? Either way, he quickly weaves between each of those stone hands and arrives face to face with the old man. But the old man isn't defenseless and tries to cast another spell. Our boy immediately grabs a rock and crushes the arsonist's arm with it. The old man starts screaming in agony. No leg, no arm now. Closing in further, Turan activates lightning magic and drives an electric shock directly into the killer. He screams in pain, becoming even more unhinged, and finally, having been defeated, his magic dissolves. Visin manages to get back on her feet while our boy pins the old man in place. Visin asks if he actually took him down. Our boy says probably, and tells her she can handle things from here. He tells her to check on the others. He pulls out several seeds and drops them onto the ground. They rapidly grow and bind the old man. He thinks, sealed his vision and his movement. It's over. He tells him to wake up. The old man just exhales. But this psychopath, still sharp enough to try something, immediately attempts to cast a spell through his mouth. Our boy stops him instantly, pressing a blade to his throat, and says if he releases any more mana, he kills him on the spot. The old man, finally realizing he's lost, asks who they are and how they found this place. Our boy says they have their methods, but he wants to know, is he the arsonist? Obviously the old man says nothing, so our boy takes his dagger and drives it into his leg again, making him scream, and tells him to answer, why is a wandering noble burning the residents of this region alive? The old man says, God. It was God who told him that if he burns the flesh and souls of sinners, he can draw closer to them, and that it was God who taught him the secret to obtaining the power of other lineages, and that if he burns more humans, he'll finally gain the flame lineage. Vissen says that's just insanity. How can someone obtain an innate lineage by committing massacres for reasons as ridiculous as that? But while they say that and criticize the old man, our boy is completely blindsided because he just realized something shocking. He remembers what Midan told him, that even ordinary people can gain power by killing demonic beasts, and that he's seen multiple mages like that. The old man keeps saying he just needs to burn a few more, and then he'll finally have the flame power. While Turan knows this isn't just the ramblings of a madman, and that maybe, just maybe, this man has uncovered the greatest secret in this world. But even with all that going through his mind, he slits the old man's throat and kills him instantly. Vissen, worried about her companion, asks what's wrong. He says it's nothing. It's just that killing someone who's tied up and completely helpless, it feels less like combat and more like slaughter. She tells him not to talk nonsense. They almost died back there. She asks if he's seriously feeling sorry for him. On top of that, thinking about how many people he killed, even if they had skinned him alive just to make him suffer longer, it still wouldn't have been enough. But while they're talking, our boy walks over to the old man's hiding spot and picks up one of his books. The moment he opens it, he sees a map with several X marks on it. He thinks, that's more than enough proof that he was the arsonist. But on other pages, he finds formulas he's never come across before, and wonders if those too were taught by the voice of that god the old man kept going on about. Vissen walks over to him, asking if he's okay, and mentions they're going to absorb the old man's mana now. Shortly after, they begin absorbing his magic, now that he's already dead. Finally, after everything settles down, in another location, a well-dressed young man, who looks very much like a noble, congratulates Miss Vissen on capturing the arsonist, and says it looks like a rising new star is emerging from House Carmane. But she tells him that's an exaggerated compliment. Then afterward, she goes over to Turan. She says they'll be continuing their travels to hunt some demonic beasts, and asks what he's planning to do. He says he's heading straight to Avicha. She brings up what she mentioned yesterday, about what that madman said back then. Our protagonist says yeah, he's not going around talking about these things. Whether it's true or not, it would only cause more chaos. Enormous chaos. Right after, she gives him a wave goodbye, saying they'll see each other again. Meanwhile, our boy thinks there's no need to share his suspicions with them. He doesn't have any concrete proof yet. And so as a few weeks go by, our boy finds himself in the middle of a desert, noticing that the air is getting more and more humid. His firepower has also dropped, and his mana consumption has gone up too. Dealing with fire magic here is going to be pretty rough. On the flip side, water magic has become much easier to use, which means one thing. He's finally reached his destination, the city of Avia. As he walked through it, in a random bar, some guys were talking about setting out tomorrow. The old man says that's right, they're going to have to head back to that cursed Enril desert, and those sea creatures and storms that never stop along the route. And last time, the bottom of the ship ended up looking like a sieve. His friends ask if it's really all that bad. But wait, there's more. The pirates too. This one-eyed old man says at this rate, instead of a salary, they're going to end up paying for their sailors' funerals. He says this job is a complete nightmare, and they could really use a skilled knight right now. While he was saying that, our boy walked into the bar and caught their conversation. He politely interrupts and says he'd like to know if they're heading to the Enril desert. The old man, suspicious, confirms they're leaving tomorrow, but says this isn't a tourist ship. They don't have room for extra cargo, and if they take on one more person, they'll have to pull a barrel of drinks, which goes against his principles. But hearing that, Turan reaches out toward the old man's cup. The man, suspicious, asks what he's doing, and our boy simply activates his magic and freezes the tankard solid. The old man stares in complete shock, and the other three immediately stand up, saying it's an honor to receive someone so distinguished in such a humble place. But our boy tells them they can just speak normally with him. He's the one asking for a job here. The old man then says, well then, Sir Knight, what exactly are you after? Turan simply says he wants to board a ship bound for the Enril desert, not as a passenger, as a contractor, and if sea creatures or pirates attack, he'll help repel them. He can consider that payment for the passage. The old man says it sounds like he's coming along with them then, and mentions their ship is pretty rough around the edges. They can't offer a decent salary, let alone a room worthy of a knight. But our boy says conditions and payment don't matter. The only goal is getting to Enril. The old man asks if he's serious. Our boy says yes. The old man, clearly excited, says it's settled then. He can join them immediately, and says he's very welcome aboard Sir Knight. So the next day at dawn, they finally set sail. But while all of that was happening, elsewhere, in a city completely engulfed in flames, in the middle of a massive war, a lone knight was facing down a dark elf with his sword. He managed to defeat it with sheer strength, but unfortunately another one came from the right. He drove his sword through that one's head too. But he had no idea there was another one coming from behind. He spun and fought that one off too. And then more and more dark elves kept swarming him, while he grew weaker and weaker under the relentless onslaught, thinking that if this keeps up, he's going to die here. But then the sky suddenly began to glow, a kind of golden light, and from that light countless bolts of lightning burned and evaporated the dark elves' bodies, which completely stunned him, because that power wiped out every last one of them. Without even turning around, he recognizes the person instantly. It's his very own young lady. She simply looks at him and tells him to rejoin the troops. He says, "Yes, my lady." Shortly after, an older man approaches Mesa and asks if she wasn't injured. This man is the vice commander of Arabian's subjugation force, Kadram Arabian. Mesa just turns to him coolly and says, "Yes, uncle." But Kadram asks her not to push herself too hard. She's worth more than one or two ordinary knights. She tells him she's fine, and more importantly, asks how the situation stands. He says it's not too bad. At this rate, they'll have the region under control again soon. But unfortunately, they still haven't found the tunnel. She tells him that when they do, they need to notify her immediately, because she'll be going in herself. Without another word, she breaks into a run toward another part of the battlefield, while her old uncle just watches. He mutters that this girl is incredibly irritating, and that his brother unfortunately raised her way too spoiled, and that if she keeps going like this, she's going to end up the same as her mother and her brother. And what happened to her mother and brother, we don't know either, because right after that, the scene shifts back to our boy again, on the ship, staring out at the sea. He thinks to himself, even if he makes it to Zehar's territory, he has no idea how to find any clues. He doesn't know what position his father held, and he knows that barging into House Zehar blind is going to be extremely dangerous, and all he has is a portrait of his mother and a few belongings, which is frankly a terrible portrait, and wonders how long it would even take to find out anything. But while he was thinking about that, the captain came over to him, saying that with him staring at the sea like that, he's going to dry the whole thing up. He asks curiously what he's thinking about. Our boy says he's just thinking about how vast the ocean is. The captain says yes, it's incredibly vast, and that they say the sea people get sick just looking at it. He asks if he's handling the seasickness all right. Our boy says he's fine. The captain, in a friendly tone, says he can see that Turan has been learning the ropes of seamanship from his first mate. Everything from tying knots to handling the sails, and that the first mate was very excited to be teaching all of this to a knight. Our boy, very good-naturedly, says he just thought it'd be good to pick up something new, and that it's more fun than he expected. But while they were talking, mealtime arrived. The captain cheerfully says, "All right, time to eat. Everyone to the mess hall." Our boy is also in the mess hall, chatting with one of the crew members, who mentions that food on land was better, but at least they didn't forget the sauerkraut. Without it, they'd have died of the gum disease long ago. Curious, Turan asks what that is. The man explains it's a disease where the gums bleed until the person dies, and that acidic food can help treat it. And since fruit spoils so fast, sauerkraut works much better. And yes, the taste is awful. Our boy says that's pretty fascinating, but asks how they figured that out. The man says someone at some point discovered it, and the knowledge spread from there, and that before that, some people used to eat raw cherries. But while they were talking, a crew member up above called out to everyone, "There's a ship ahead, about 2 hours out, mid-sized vessel." They asked if it's pirates. He says he doesn't know, but there's no family banner flying from it. The old man beside Turan says that sounds like pirates then, and that he knew something felt off about this nice weather. Right then the captain tells everyone to prepare for combat. The first mate goes to the captain and asks what they should do. If they run, their ship is a bit faster, and if the pirates chase them for long enough, they might catch up. But if the wind cooperates, they might be able to dock at a nearby island. The captain stays silent, then turns to Turan and asks if he's good. Our boy says if there are no knights or nobles among them, it's no problem at all. The captain says all right then, prepare to engage. Finally, the two ships come alongside each other. The pirates order them to stop, and maybe they'll spare their lives. But our boy, standing at the center, asks that if they surrender, will they really be spared? The first mate says being thrown into the sea after having your legs cut off, does that count as being spared? And Turan says just as he thought, no reason to let any of them live. He simply leaps onto their ship, catching every single pirate completely off guard. Then he activates his water magic, creating multiple water crystals that immediately strike and kill several of them. While our boy says, if they're that kind of people, there's no reason to hold back. Right after he takes out a few of them, the rest freeze up, but the pirates start yelling at each other not to be scared. If they don't kill him no matter what, they'll be the ones dying here. So basically all of them charge at Turan at once. Our boy starts scanning in every direction. He draws out more water magic and shapes it into a crystal sword. With a single swing he cuts off one guy's arm and takes his head. Then more and more pirates come rushing at him trying to take him down. Much more easily now, our boy deflects every strike. All of it thanks to the training he went through with his friend's uncle. And because of that night combat training, he's able to take take down multiple pirates with just his crystal sword, without even casting separate spells, since the sword itself is the spell. And he can even bring them down with his bare hands. But then more and more pirates come pouring toward Turan, while our boy gets quieter and more focused. He cuts through them one by one, slicing their bodies clean in half. But while he was finishing some of them off, another guy appeared out of nowhere behind him, trying to slash his throat with a dagger. And two more came at him with swords and spears, aiming for 3 different parts of his body. But to the complete shock of all of them, the dagger couldn't even pierce Turan's skin. Neither could the swords, leaving them absolutely stunned. Their blades couldn't cut through him. Our boy simply activates his power and drives a water crystal straight through that pirate's skull, then takes out the other 2 and charges forward into more of them, killing and tearing through every last pirate in a complete massacre. Finally, the screaming stops, and Turan is the last one standing. Back on the other ship, they can see it's over and start making their way over to the pirate vessel. The captain asks if by any chance he also knows how to work as a janitor, because if he cleans everything up this thoroughly, his sailors won't have anything left to do. Obviously thrilled to still be alive, they celebrate, saying the good Sir Knight is truly something else. At that, another sailor walks over and asks why the knight isn't going to the ship's medic first to get treated. But our protagonist says not to worry about him. He's not even a little bit hurt. All of this blood is from those pirates. Later on, in the captain's office, the captain tells Mr. Turan that he combed through those scoundrels thoroughly. And that ship is a merchant vessel that went missing in Avicha a few years back. It looks like the pirates captured it, repainted it, and were using it to commit their crimes. Exactly what you'd expect from people with no scruples. He asks Turan what he intends to do, and since he handled the fight on his own, the full rights of ownership over the ship belong entirely to him. He congratulates him on that, saying he's now the new owner of a ship, which leaves our boy genuinely surprised. And he immediately asks what he's supposed to do with it. The captain says, well, there are a few options. He can bring it back to Avicha and track down the ship's original owner, then ask for a reward. Of course, between the paperwork and buttering up the bureaucrats, 1 or 2 months would fly by in the blink of an eye. Or he could head to the Emerald Desert and sell it there. But in his opinion, the best move is to sell it at the Northern Sea Archipelago, which is right along the route they're heading now. That place is always desperate for ships, and by nature, goods sell at the highest price to those who need them most. But our boy says either way, it's not like he can sail the ship alone, and if he uses the captain's crew, he'll have to pay them. The captain says as expected of him, and that in that case, if he could set aside a portion of the profits as a service fee for the guys, just enough to cover the work, that would already be more than enough. Our boy says he can handle selling everything, and he'll give the captain 20% of the sale, which immediately gets the captain very excited. He's definitely going to make some money this time, and says he knows a lot of people over there, so he'll make sure they get a solid price. But while they were talking, one of the sailors walked into the room and told the captain they'd found a mermaid. The captain nearly chokes and asks what he means. A mermaid? Are there actually mermaids attacking them now? But the sailor says no, that's not it. There was one being kept captive in the hold of the pirate ship. Back on the pirate ship, the captain asks the first mate if he means that little precious thing was in there. The first mate says yes, and that he hasn't gone in to see yet, he only received a report. The captain says he did well. He then mentions to Mr. Turan whether he wants to take a look at this little precious thing. Our boy says sure, absolutely. He's never seen a mermaid before, but as they're walking over, he asks if mermaids usually sell for a high price. The captain says if it's a beautiful female, the sheltered rich nobles back on dry land, who have mountains of money but look like walking skeletons, lose their heads over anything mystical. They'd call it fascinating. Finally, Turan and the captain step into the small room where the mermaid is being held. Turan comes face to face with it, but he realizes it's actually a very small boy, staring back at him with extremely suspicious eyes. The captain just sighs and says what a shame. Turned out to be a male. That's worth almost nothing. Those nobles won't have any interest in a merboy. Though, well, unless it's something like legendary royalty who can transform into a fish. But the merboy immediately demands indignantly how he dares call him just a male, and that he is Armani, the 47th prince of the Northern Kingdom. He orders them to show him some respect. You filthy land-dwelling commoners. Our boy asks if this kid is saying he's royalty. The captain says it seems that way, but he might be bluffing, figuring they'll keep him alive to sell him instead of killing him. So Turan walks over to the merboy and asks if by any chance he can transform into a fish, merprince. The boy says he can't right now. The captain asks why. He says they're tied up out of water, so it's impossible, and that he can only transform if he's in water under proper conditions. Turan and the captain exchange a look, realizing this kid is basically trying to trick them into letting him escape. So the captain asks Turan what he wants to do. Our boy asks if it's true that merfolk typically devour humans. The captain says that's right. Our boy very seriously looks the kid in the eye and says then he's going to kill him, since they said he's worth nothing anyway. And it would be great if that were true, but well, if they believe what this kid said and release him into the sea, he might just swim away, and they'd be standing there looking like complete fools. So he stares the kid down with his full killer intent, leaving the so-called mer prince increasingly on edge. And the kid starts screaming at him to stop it. How dare he do this to a prince? Ignoring everything completely, our boy keeps pushing out his aura, leaving the kid more and more terrified. And the kid quietly says he has never eaten a human being. But our boy keeps staring him down without blinking, and grinding his teeth in frustration. The prince says, if he lets him live, he'll give him a treasure. A great treasure. Surprised, our boy asks what he means by treasure. And the kid says yes, a treasure. Something left behind by the gods of the Freya race, which you humans so dearly love. So then later they stop at a small island. Our boy and the captain remain on the pirate ship. The captain asks if he's reached a conclusion. Our boy says yes. Fortunately, it doesn't seem to be that far from here, so he'll go and be back tonight. So that night, our boy and the so-called mer prince set off on a small boat across the sea. The prince, clearly nervous, asks why these restraints. Does he really think he's going to run? He is royalty, he keeps his promises. But Turan stays silent. The nervous kid asks seriously, if there really is a treasure there, will he let him go? Our boy says yes, he'll let him go. So Turan uses his magic to navigate the small boat across the sea. The mer boy says that if he goes there and ends up disappointed, it's not his fault, and that it's a treasure of the Freya race, so by your human standards, it should be something incredible. Turan just tells him to be quiet, he already gets it, and tells him to just lead the way. Out in the middle of the sea, the little mer boy and our boy keep sailing. They finally reach the location. Turan simply dives into the water, following the coordinates the kid gave him. After swimming for a while, he finally arrives at the so-called treasure, and he stares in complete shock. A gigantic serpent-like creature, resting at the bottom of the ocean.